right, I'm gonna open up with that hard opening.
No, I don't. I'm not gonna do anything.
And I'm gonna swing the audience here and meld
No,
their ears to the yappies and drop the
no,
bomb.
no. I don't even know why you called for this emergency recording session.
It's not emergency recording. You're the one who's like, we need to fit our quota, like the
Yeah, and then you're like,
administrators of the police
and then
office.
today, right now, you're less. You just like barely half an hour ago, you're like, do it now.
Well, I understand as you get older, time is just so fleeting that, if you can do something now, it's either done now or it never gets done because
Yeah,
you never really have time to do anything anymore. So,
yeah, well, it's not like everybody's on call to record either. I thought,
oh yeah, I'm not expecting anything. If you said yeah, sure, let's do it, then we do it. If you said oh, I'm busy, then I don't know, I'll do something else.
all right, what do you got? What do you got on the docket today?
I was thinking of like I was listening to a talk and I thought that was interesting of how like you know technology kind of changes the meta for us.
Uh-huh.
Changes the meta for everyone. Like as new technology comes, like um how we live our life and what's considered normal changes, right? So, for example, back in the day, let's say dating, people would live in different communities and stuff, and it's okay to like not talk to your significant others 2 to 3 days, like because you're not in close proximity with them. Sometimes you don't get to talk to them, and because we didn't have mobile phones back in the day, that you know it's normal not to call them, right? But then when everyone started having cell phones and texting becomes a thing, then suddenly the meta changes. So then you're almost expected to always be texting your SO all the time. And like I think in high school or in mid school, if a girl didn't get a good morning text kind of thing, they would think something's up, that like you're planning to break up with them and stuff, right? There's all this like meta ness to it. And I feel like with social media, it has created this new meta where you can't disconnect anymore. So like, in school or in a job that you hate, at the end of the day when you're done with the job, you can always say, wow, that's a shitty thing, and you just complain and go to the bar and you can disconnect from your work. Like you leave it all behind and you figure it out the next day, right? But with like school and social media, if you had a rough time, you're still connected, right? Like people still talk to you about things that happen in school on the internet and stuff, and it's really difficult to disconnect compared to people without compared to people who grew up in school without social media.
Yeah, I don't know, fucking people just mailed shit back then. Like you could play chess with someone across the country just by mail. So,
Actually, that's a funny thing too, because like when we were talking about when you talk about relationships, like texting before the texting meta, you're right. Like
oh, letters
people would
are
write love
so
letters,
important.
right?
Yeah, yeah,
Like
yeah.
nowadays, no one like I don't know. It would just be weird if you wrote a love letter to
My
someone,
dearest Jimmy Bob, I am in receipt of your letter written like 2 months, 6 months ago. I hope
right?
all is well and you are still alive and not having succumbed to tuberculosis.
So, do you think infidelity is easier with the olden day because with love letters or harder? Because um, in one way, infidelity got easier with technology because you have like apps and stuff to connect with people, right? And you can create fake. Well, you always create fake profiles, but I guess you can manage it on the sidelines. But then now, but it also becomes harder because things are more traceable and there's more records and stuff. Like,
Uh, I don't know, man. It's probably just as the same now, maybe more. I don't know.
for
Uh,
every pro, there's a con.
I don't think there'd be something as like a long distance relationship back then. That would be like relationship by mail.
Well, I felt like during the World War II, everyone's relationships were long, right? Because a lot of the guys would have to go to war.
Yeah. Uh, but I don't know. I don't know what like the climate was back then. I'm not sure if like the whole country's at war. I don't know, I don't know, like maybe like cheating and also like maybe like people were pretty strict back then on like who's a homewrecker or whatever. I don't know. Like you could probably maybe people would like get like well like wreck you like if you're a homewrecker. Like if they found out someone was a homewrecker, they'd like bring him out and like I don't know, like do a public shaming or lynching of them. I have no idea.
You really don't like homewreckers, do you?
Well, no, I don't think a lot of people do, but I'm just saying like back then I think it'd be even more like
Yeah.
even more frowned upon. It's
What
like
if you were a homewrecker but you didn't know you were a homewrecker? Like,
I think, well, at least the person would. I guess the person would be. It would be a little bit more innocent because if you didn't know, then you didn't know. If they lied to you or whatever, then
yeah,
it's
exactly.
solely on the person that was lying to you, right?
Yeah. But then it's like your word versus their word kind of thing, right? So then it can be troublesome that way
I know in
to
some
prove your
countries that
innocence.
I know there's some countries that it's almost like it's a punishable offense if you do that, like yeah, if you're like a spouse of like a military member and then you like fool around with that spouse. I think there's some countries that have laws that actually put you in jail for that.
Really? Damn. So I think that's the one thing. Getting married is kind of annoying. Is that you allow government to dictate your relationship? You
Well,
know.
that's well, some of it doesn't matter if it's like some kind of law or whatever. Those like really tribal areas in like India or like
Mm-hmm.
Pakistan or wherever, where
Mm-hmm.
it's like your dad just finds out that you went and had like you went and hung out with like someone of a different religion or whoever, and then they'll
Mm-hmm.
just like they'll like honor kill you or some shit.
Yeah,
And
I think that was in White Tiger, wasn't it? Like the main protagonist, he was hiding his faith because in order to work for his boss or whatever.
no, yeah, but that's not exactly the same. Like
Oh, okay.
he was hiding that he was I don't know what the fuck he was again. Was he Muslim or something?
A
Yeah,
Sikh? No,
for
well, maybe Muslim.
for employment, it's a little different. No, there's like that would be like honor killings where some poor village or whatever they have these like unwritten rules, and if you bring like shame to your family, your family will just like straight up kill you.
I
If
thought
you-
that was when we're talking about this tribalism. I thought it was interesting that like people in the Middle East, like say like the Taliban and stuff, like when you're given really two bad choices, like either you join us or die kind of thing, a lot of people just join them. And when the West speaks of how evil the Taliban's are, some people who are part of it aren't even they don't want to be part of it, they're just forced into it. Like, and they're kind of grouped into this evilness, right?
Yeah,
I
dude, I don't
feel.
think a lot of liberals can wrap their minds around like the government that they set up in Afghanistan was like
Mhm.
was to a lot of people outside of like Kabul, they viewed that as worse than the Taliban. They'd rather throw their lot in with the Taliban and overthrow the government.
Yeah.
I don't think they realize how shitty they made her. How shitty these guys thought that, oh yeah, we're just gonna come in and fucking prop up this government in the name of fucking whatever,
Uh,
America.
it was so funny too because I was watching this. I think the Trump supporters and one of the guys were saying how the Taliban and the Middle East situation when they took back the country
Yeah.
was all a hoax, and he was saying like that one guy running on the airplane, like he was like waving and stuff, like he was saying it's all fake and stuff. That plane was staged, and all the people at the airport were staged.
Wait, like a public guy, like a
Yeah, public guy.
politician.
Yeah, well, not a politician. I think he was just like a Trump supporter. He was just on the streets. I think he
Oh,
was.
then he's a nobody.
He's a nobody.
I thought you were saying
But
like a sitting
it's just,
senator or a congressman was saying that on TV. That
oh
would be
no.
insane.
Well, I mean, that's also believable. But no, I'm just saying it's just kind of crazy how how difficult it is for everyone to have um, common knowledge. And I think, you know, with COVID that like if we ever do get invaded by aliens, there will be a huge section of us will still say it's a hoax or that this is not real. Like if aliens were to come to Earth, how many of us would actually believe it? You know what I mean? Or how many of us would just be like disbelievers and say like there's no such thing and the government is setting this up.
Yeah, I don't know. I bet there probably would be. I think those will be like the people that can't cope because
I
this is
think that
this is
would be the next.
cope.
That should be the sequel to Independence Day when aliens invade, and instead of the world all rallying up and fighting them, that we just have a lot of like disbelief and misinformation and like fighting amongst ourselves, and the alien just like wipes us out.
That would be, yeah. I mean, like that would be just like like just psychologically just psychologically extreme levels of cope.
There's a culprit. What do you mean, like?
I mean, like if aliens invaded the world and then you still have people that deny like aliens are invading the world.
Hmm. Well, like what when you so with COVID, people who don't believe it's real, or are they coping, or what are they coping it with by not believing it?
That fucking COVID's real. They're coping that they're just coping that, oh, no, it's totally not real. No, I'm just gonna keep doing everything as it was before. I don't believe.
Oh, okay. Usually when I'm thinking of coping, it's like they're doing something to handle another situation. Like they don't believe in something and they believe in something else in order to like say like there's a death in the family and
Ah,
they're trying
all
to
different levels of cope. No, this one is more like internet cope, where you're just like putting your head in the sand and you're like, no, 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 that's not real.
yeah. Yeah, I think with the aliens, I think a lot. Like if it was to happen today, I think um there is that head in the sand kind of thing. I think it would be really hard for us to rally together. I think this whole concept that human beings were really good at rallying together, I think that used to be a thing, but I don't know if that would be today. Like
Yeah, you know
I
what?
don't trust.
I think that meta is like left over from World War II. I think that was like
Right.
World War II meta where, like it's seemingly like the Allies, which with complete different ideological values and political systems, actually allied together to fight the fascists, right?
But they didn't ally willingly, right? Because like US what didn't want to be part of the war for quite some time until they were forced their hand, wasn't it?
Well, it's even more interesting than that. I think even Britain and France and the United States. Before then, you had a substantial population that was thinking like, yeah, you know what? I would rather be with Germany than be with the USSR, right? I mean, like there was
Hmm.
a lot before in the 30s, early 30s, there was a lot of like Nazi sympathy, uh, Nazi sympathies and Nazi fucking yeah, well, sympathizers. That was the word I was looking for. In these
The
countries.
Nazi sympathy.
Yeah, well, it is. They would have They would be more sympathetic to the Nazi cause. So you actually had a sizable portion of people in these countries, before the like the political shifts made it so that they became in direct conflict. And then these guys were like, oh, I guess we have to shut the fuck up now. you know, and you see, like these countries still to this day have problems with like neo-Nazi groups, right?
Yeah. But
So
neo Nazis, they're not related to the Nazis, right? Aren't they just
well, they don't
not?
just nowadays they don't have to be specifically German, right? They don't have to be part of the German
But they, yeah,
party.
but their beliefs aren't even the same as the Nazis, right?
I think their beliefs are they're pretty similar. They're just not like mainstream, like mainstream societal like
I thought the idea of neo Nazis were just racist white men, like who
well,
are.
what were the Nazis then if they weren't racist?
Well, I thought the Nazis were just people who were following Hitler and stuff.
Yeah, and his ideology was one of a racist one. It was,
Right.
I mean,
But
Nazis.
can you be working for can you be part of the Axis and not be a Nazi if you're in Germany?
Well, you can't. I don't think you'd join up if you didn't have like some flavor of fascist ideology. So like Nazism and Mussolini's Italian fascism, there are some subtle differences, right? Like if you're gonna get into
Hmm.
nuances, but broadly, not even broadly speaking, like basically they're following the same ideology, like a fascist, which is like a racial supremacy or
Hmm.
like a hierarchy of the world ideology, right? That's the same with Japan. Like the degree of how they would become fascist or just what kind of ideology, like what kind of scales between tipping towards like like some like monarchist version of uh uh fascism like Japan did, or like just the German like rebirth sort of fascism that the Nazi party had. Those would be the subtle differences, but the main ones they pretty much shared them. And that's why they would find it more likely to be ideological allies than not.
Yeah.
Right. And then yeah, that's what you gotta be totally racist. I mean like neo Nazis,
You
they're
feel like that's a requirement? You gotta be totally racist. If you're not racist, you can't join.
you pretty much have to be totally. You pretty much have to be racist, or at least like if they make it so easily that you can that basically the ideology is lubricated, so then racism can easily enter. You know, I mean, like people call like Pinochet's regime in Chile like fascist. They call Franco's in Spain, nationalist Spain fascist as well. And they
Yeah.
can make an argument for it. But like they're not. I would say they're almost there, just not like fully hardcore. They're like more like fascist prospects. And I feel like if they were to continue, if they had like the political environment to continue on, I think they would easily have been just as brutal and expansionist as like the Nazis and the Nazis and the other fascists would be. It just so happens that fucking at that time, fascism was basically had a world war to defeat it. So even if you're a nationalist Franco, you're like, oh yeah, you know what? I'm just gonna keep to myself and not try to be Hitler because I don't want to get obliterated. And then Pinochet is kind of the same, where it's like, yeah, I'm not gonna go start invading everywhere in South America because that's totally not popular right now. But I will just do very fascist like uh kind of like administration in Chile. Not like by racial standards, but like a very authoritarian well totalitarian flavor in Chile based on
Hmm.
like hierarchy and order in society and traditional. Fuck, what was it? Yeah, okay, so like
Oh, wait, are
nowadays,
we starting again?
no, I'm just continuing from before.
Okay. Okay, go
I'm
ahead.
just
Go.
like I think nowadays the neo Nazis
Hmm.
they do look at Hitler like as like some sort of
As their
like
leader, as their
yeah,
old
like
leader.
spiritual leader or something that this is their messiah basically.
Who's their current leader? Do they have a
I
current
don't think
leader?
they have like current they you have like local leaders or local like neo-Nazi leaders, right?
Right.
There's just no one as like for their own prestige as like as important as someone as Hitler or something. But they'll wear like Nazi symbols, right? They'll wear like SS symbols. They'll wear Nazi stuff. They have subtle things too, so then they can operate in like regular society, but you won't know that they're Nazis. And some of them
Hmm.
are like the numbers 1488. Like that's one way of them like kind of like having it as like a symbol to other people that are familiar with it. They can say, oh, like they have 1488 as a tattoo or 1488 as like on like fucking merchandise or whatever.
Hmm.
Normal people they won't know what that is. They'll be like, okay, whatever, that's whatever.
Do you think, as a tattoo
Christopher
artist?
Columbus or whatever, or whatever.
Yeah.
1488. But what it actually means is like the 14 words, which is like a regular like white supremacist slogan saying like you know you protect the white race and not let other races displace us. I don't know the exact thing, but it's 14 words of that. And then 88 is in like using the English alphabet. 88 is like the number, it corresponds to the letter H, right? From A B C D E F, all the way to H. That's number
Uh-huh.
8. So what that is HH, which stands for
Oh,
Heil
Hitler.
Hitler. Yeah.
Hi, Hitler.
So so they'll have those they'll have those like fucking secret messagings, right?
Wait, how do you know this? Were you a
No,
neo-Nazi?
no, no, yeah, but it's like, that's one of those things where it's almost like trivial knowledge, right? You won't know unless, I guess if you're like if you follow like political stuff, you'll know that
Yeah.
these groups do this thing,
As
right?
a if you're a tattoo artist, like do you have to study this, like to refuse tattooing people,
I don't
like on
know.
certain
Yeah,
symbols and stuff?
that would be the thing. If let's say you became a tattoo artist today, you Bmoney, yeah, you wouldn't know about it. So someone says like, "Oh, I want to get 1480." You probably wouldn't think much of it. You'd be like, "Oh, okay, sure, I don't, whatever."
Yeah.
You might maybe if you get a lot of like fucking neo-Nazi skinheads coming into your shop and they're like, "Yeah, I want to get 1488," you'd be like, "Huh, seems to be something up with
If
this."
there's a trend, there's
I wonder like
something up, and then
like
you're like,
yeah. I wonder if this is like a yeah. I wonder if this is like some kind of fucking new trendy
well,
number
like
or some shit.
in I know in Dairy Queen, one of the because they have a company that does the cake designs and stuff, and they have a booklet, and you just pick whatever design. And one of the design got taken out, and it was the Confederation flag, because
Yeah,
that ever since the Donald Trump thing
yeah,
or the raid, so they took that off. So that's something you can't get on a BQ cake anymore, but you
yeah.
used to be able to.
Confederate flag.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. They recognize that these things are very problematic, right? Like here
Hmm.
in America, you get a Confederate flag. Yeah, you're gonna invite more trouble to yourself than it's even worth,
I think
right?
that's kind of funny if you call tattoo parlors like, yeah, I would like to get this Confederate flag tattooed. Are those available at your shop still? Like, do you have anyone who's okay with this?
Yeah, most of them will be like, no, but you're gonna have to find like your like sympathetic tattoo parlor, right? Or get the tattoo in prison.
Yeah, the Nazi sympathy ones.
Yeah. Yeah, well, that's where you'd go, right? Like if you want to get those kinds of tattoos or like fucking cakes baked like that. A prison cake.
I wonder if it's kind of like a prison cake. You think it would be too obvious if you brought a cake with a Confederation flag on it into prison? You're like, oh, they have to
Yeah, I
search
don't
it.
think you're allowed to bring like fucking cakes or something because they can just smuggle shit in the cakes.
Well, I feel like you could just have it walk through like a metal detector and stuff, right? It's like,
I think like I don't know. I don't know what they do in the prisons. I imagine that if you bring like a big cake, the prison guard or whatever, either will be like straight up saying no, you can't do it, or they'll be like, you know what, we're gonna cut into this cake.
I hear there's a lot. Well, I think in like TikTok and YouTube, there's categories for everything, but there are a lot of like people who've got out of prison and now are making, I guess, a community of people who got out of prison and stuff, and they talk about their life in prison, things like that, and how they got arrested and
Yeah,
what are the norms in prison and things like that. So it's kind of interesting to have that insight.
yeah. I think no, there's a whole. I think there's like a whole genre by now. There's a whole genre of like stories that you can get that just are about prison life.
Yeah, the prison life and the meta and stuff. I think like if like before going to prison or committing an act of crime, they should watch this video just to know like how to be a good inmate. Just
the
just make
orientation,
sure they
the
know that
orientation beforehand,
exactly.
before you commit the crime, or you watch it and you're like, hey, that's not actually that bad. All right, there's
Yeah,
no
exactly.
inhibitions whatsoever anymore.
Well, apparently like jail and prison are like two different things. Like jail, I think is like temporary, whereas prison is something that
Yeah,
you're staying for long
after
term
you
kind of
get
thing.
sentenced by a judge, yeah, you get sent to the prison. The jail is
Prison,
like the holdings. It's like the place that they hold you before you're like,
and they're saying like prison in some ways a little bit better because you have a space of your own, whereas jail is like not really because it's temporary and kind of things like that.
Yeah, I mean, like depending on what kind of crime, you can just post bail, right? So you don't have to stay in the jail. You can be at
Yeah,
home or wherever. You just have to show up for your. You didn't need to go to your trial.
yeah.
I mean, it's not like you're gonna be like, oh shit, I wish I went to prison instead of going to jail or something.
I
Yeah.
just like it's just interesting. It's just like there's a tutorial for everything nowadays. I feel you could like look up anything.
I feel like they will start just the way the United States is. I think they will start like giving like a pre-jail tutorial to people. I feel like they might as well play it now because all their prisons are basically privately owned prisons, and they have even like a quota that they have towards the state where if
Yeah,
prison in certain states are not filled to the capacity that was on that whatever contract that they have to the state, then the state has to pay them basically.
yeah.
Like the prisons, they have to make sure the prisons are full so that the prison can, cover the costs and also make profit or whatever. It's entirely fucked up system. I mean, I feel
Well,
like
it's because you said it was a private business. I think that's one of the issues already, right?
yeah,
Having it.
100%. Like in every other country, you'd be like, oh, it's really good that our prisons are actually not being filled. Whereas, in the United States, you'd be like,
US, they're incentivized to fill it and
yeah,
expand
this
and you
quarter
make
looks
it bigger.
bad because our prison is looking hella empty. We gotta do something to
Yeah,
increase the numbers.
exactly. It is, yeah, it's one of those problems. It's similar to like homelessness, whereas like people really don't like it. Like they see it as a huge issue, but really no one wants to address it or talk about it. Like everyone always talk about the simple answer, like, well, don't go to jail or something like that, or
Mm.
don't get addicted to drugs and you won't be homeless and stuff like that. But a lot of these people, it's not like they chose to go there, or like there are usually circumstances that kind of push them into that direction, right?
Oh yeah, I
Uh,
mean,
uh,
like this is one of the biggest problems that a lot of people, including me, have with this ideology, where it's like, with the right wing sort of ideology, where it says, like, poor people are poor for a reason, or if they didn't work hard enough, or
yeah,
like fucking like that just proves their worth, basically, right? Like they're just lazy bums. They're not like if you're successful, it means you worked hard at it or whatever, or
yeah,
you earned that success. And it's not like and they will like poo poo everything that comes with like your station in life that you start off with, right?
yeah,
That's not even a thing to them, and that's completely insane, right? Like
yeah.
very
Because there
obvious.
are rich people who are very lazy. They're just rich because they're rich.
Course, yeah. There's no way that this argument just doesn't exist in reality. Like, there's no way
Yeah.
that this characterization
I think a
exists.
lot of people say those things because it makes them feel, they feel good about themselves. That like, hey, I'm not in prison, so I must be doing things right, or
I
I
guess
have money, and it's
I
because
feel
it's like I worked hard for it.
it's a little perverse because some of these people that are like really hardcore espousing this, they're like in the same boat as everyone else. They could be just as poor or if not poorer, right? Or in a worse situation, but it's almost like they just go up to shill for this, right?
Right.
I would understand if you're like super rich and you're like, yeah, I don't want this taken away from me, so that's why I think this is a perfect society or whatever, right? Where I'm on top. It just baffles like the mind where if you're not one of the guys on top and you advocate this and you're like a hardcore fan, like a
Yeah.
fanboy of this, I'm like, you'd be like, why, right? This is why.
I do think when we look at prison and homelessness, it's like a sign of how our system doesn't have second chances. Because like with homelessness, there's a study that found that the best way to get people to not be homeless is that once they become homeless, to give them a home so
Yeah,
that they can rebuild themselves. Because like the thing is, the longer you become homeless and the longer you live on the streets, the harder it is for you
yeah, you're screwed.
to,
You can't
yeah,
leave it.
yeah, you become part of that life. And it's the same as incarceration, prison life, that the longer you're in prison, the more likely you are to come back into the system. And like because what happens like with homelessness, and I think even in prison, is that once you've been there and you try to come out of it, all your social connections are gone, right? And so all your friends are gone, so you don't have much support. All your employers aren't gonna rehire you, right? So like at that point, how do you get a job? How do you get a place to live? Like how do you get back on your feet?
Yeah.
And the government is not there to do that for you. They're not gonna set up a newly released inmate who was maybe like um was like now red tape for being a child molester or whatever, right? Now they can't live in certain parts of the city because
Oh yeah, like
children, like playground zone, they can't live near playground zone, right? So
yeah,
then,
they're done. Yeah, like if you were like a fucking pedo, you're
yeah,
done.
exactly. If you're a predator or something, you're done. You're like, so what is as a society, what are we trying to tell these people that hey, if you commit these crime, you might as well be dead?
Oh,
Like,
dude, if
oh,
you're like if you're a pedo in our society, like you don't, you might as well be dead
yeah,
because
it's you
that
might as
is
well just be dead. Like, what's the point of living at this point?
yeah. You're not gonna get a lot of sympathy from people who are
Yeah.
saying, "Oh, why don't you think about it?" No, they're in pretty much 99.999% of people's eyes. Like you might as well just be dead if you're a
Yeah,
pedo. Like,
and I'm not justifying any of these people's actions or anything. What I'm trying to say is, what is our view of these people? Like, if we're gonna just put them through hell, hang on, why keep them in society at any
right? Why not
meaningful
just kill
reason?
them? That's
Yeah, exactly. I mean, what we're doing to them is might be even worse than death. Like we're just making them live a worse life,
outcast,
right?
the branded outcast. Yeah, yeah. You know
Yeah,
what? Like for a lot of crimes that aren't, like fucking murder or like fucking child rapists and stuff.
yeah,
The ones that are like I feel that are lesser than that,
yeah.
I feel like yeah, society has to do a way better job of
Well, the
integrating.
big one is addiction. Let's say drug addiction. Let's say you were high and stuff, and you did something stupid, or like you're drunk and stuff.
Or just
Like,
having like possession, right?
or
Like
even yeah, exactly.
action for
Possession or
police.
transportation, any of those stuff land you time in jail. It's so bad. It sucks. And then even if you want to come out straight, where's that support? Where's that help? It's like, what is our program to rehabilitate? And I think it comes down to is what is our philosophy for prison? Is it for punishment or is it for rehabilitation, right?
Hmm.
And a lot of people are, it depends on your political view. Some people would say
It
it's
is
for
very,
punishment,
it's
like this is
also
what they deserve.
yeah, it's very it really matters on your like yeah, your ideology, your politics of the whole thing.
Yeah.
How you
And I think punishment is probably the easy one to view because it's like, yeah, this is what you deserve and what do you get out of it? And it's kind of like, don't do it kind of thing. Which is great and all, but then once you punish people, it only it's almost like creating that echo chamber, right? Because once you've been punished and branded as a demon or whatever, less than human, you're gonna look for allies within your circle, and it's gonna be people criminals. So then eventually you just become this like Gotham City kind of thing, right? Where you just have this rogue gallery because you have no support on the outside world. So you're
yeah,
gonna
like like especially if you were going to go to jail for some really low level kind of crimes,
yeah,
like just the fact that you went to jail, you went to prison, you got sent, you have some kind of record, yeah, like you're screwed for the rest of your life,
yeah,
and
exactly.
yeah,
Like
you
I that's what I was thinking too. Like the idea, like if I was someone in power or had a lot of wealth and I wanted to tackle a problem like homelessness or imprisonment, like I was thinking of homelessness is that I would create a buy a condo and get people who are homeless to live in there and get them off, but I would only get people who were recently homeless. I would not even try for any of the long term ones. Like I would
well,
have people, but then the problem with that is then people are gonna view me as a horrible person because
yeah,
I'm
like a
saving selective people.
means tested homeless policies. That
Yeah,
would be dumb too. I mean, because what are you gonna do? Like, oh yeah, you've been on the street for 6 months, you're in, but any longer than that, you're screwed. And then some guy was like,
yeah, pretty much.
well, I was in there for like 6 months and one day. Oh,
Well,
you're screwed.
my whole idea would be it's to because one is I want to get funding and I want people to say, hey, this works, kind of thing, right? And the research shows that it works for people who haven't been homeless for too long, right? And then that's my whole idea is to make it work and then get more funding and then get more people off. But the ones who are lifers, it's like
You get you
there's no evidence that they're gonna do any better. So I can't.
Well, I still think your policy, yo, if you were gonna come up with that kind of platform, it would be like dead upon arrival because
Well, I
you wouldn't
wouldn't
win
tell
anyway.
them that's my idea,
You
but to
wouldn't
my
win anyway.
team, this is the idea.
You wouldn't, yeah, like internally, yeah. Somehow the internal plan will get leaked anyways. But I mean, like you're not gonna win
Um,
anyway because to the people that want
yeah,
to
I
solve,
guess you're
it's
right.
just gonna be like, what the fuck's wrong with you? Why are you only like, why are you
Well,
only giving
it
criteria
would be
for this?
like the Facebook thing, right? Where the lady was like, Facebook cares more about what makes them profit versus the better of humanity, blah blah blah, right? It would be like that kind of leak.
Yeah, but you also have to think if you're gonna say, oh, I'm gonna solve homelessness or whatever, and then you have a
Yeah,
huge lobby that is like real estate, the real estate sector that will be against you, right? Because you're just gonna depress like real estate values and
if
whatever.
anything, I would it would increase because there are certain areas in any city that has homeless people that because of homeless people it does depress their real estate. So in some ways, yes, it may feel like I'm depressing another area by bringing homeless people, but if they're coming out being successful, right, then I'm increasing the real estate somewhere else because those homeless people would have been displaced. So it kind of balances out.
No, they won't see it that way at all.
Yeah, they won't
No,
say it that way,
they
but
won't see it that way
but
at all.
in the grand
No,
scheme
but
of things, that's what
also,
how it would happen.
well, I mean, in the grand scheme of things, they won't even see the dividends from that. Like society would see
That's
the
right.
of
That's
it.
right.
You as like a real estate, like fucking,
It's
like either
yeah.
company or like a house developer, you're not gonna see that. You're gonna see like, no, you're gonna see like, oh, our profits are kind of getting whittled away because now we have to, set aside land for low income or even just
I think
totally provided
you have to
housing.
do it the same. You would have to almost do it like how police do it. Like you don't advertise where your police stations headquarters are, you know, or like the military, like they don't advertise where our naval bases is, right?
They
You almost
know
have to do the same.
bases are.
Sorry.
They know where the bases are. There's no base.
Kinda, but like,
Yeah,
cause in Google Maps and stuff, I don't know some of them it's really strange, but like, I know for some companies you are not allowed to fly over
yeah.
military
You're
bases, right?
not allowed
But for
to.
some reason, Google Maps sometimes they were able to fly over it, and I'm just like, how are they able to fly over it and other companies cannot?
You can get like a rough location, and some of the Google Maps or some of the maps they'll like blank it out, but you can
They
see,
yeah, a lot of them will either blank it out or blur it
yeah.
to obscurity. So you, but at the same time, that's almost kind of like marking it with a red X. But I mean, if you're gonna nuke something, it's kind of obvious where they're gonna be. But yeah, you can't just like.
Your little homeless policy is not gonna fly. It's the way that you've said it would be. That's why if you're gonna do it, you gotta do it balls to the wall. You'd be
I
like,
think
you you
well,
you're
mhm,
going to like you're going to be up against some sector, you
yeah,
know,
I
and
think
most
if I were to
people,
do it, it would be almost to do it with no shame and no like, and not to be influenced by public opinion. I would do it almost like I don't care, I'm doing it kind of thing
that's
because
the
you would have
majority.
to.
The majority of them aren't influenced by public opinion, whereas they would rather just. It's way more easier just to throw it in with the land developers, with
Hmm.
these guys that have the money that donate to your political campaign or capital or whatever, right? That's what
Yeah,
most people do. They already go against public opinion.
yeah,
The
I
public
think.
opinion is usually like, okay, like in most
Mhm.
places, public opinion, the majority public opinion is like, yeah, why don't you build some like very low income or subsidized housing in these places?
Hmm. Hmm. And some people get really jealous. They're like, oh, why do these people get like,
Yeah, you'll get
get,
some NIMBY types, right? But
and then and it doesn't make sense. It's like you're jealous because they're poor. Like, I don't
NIMBY
understand.
just the very the very composition of NIMBY means that they're
Hmm.
usually in the like the minority of like numbers because it's
Hmm.
usually like, oh, it's just the people in that specific area affected. They usually aren't going to be like too big of a obstacle. Usually the obstacle is much more like bigger entities. Like if you have an actual like sector that lobbies, like an economic sector that lobbies against you, right?
Yeah. But yeah, it's almost like I think we talked about this on old podcast. How there's a European prison where it's like almost like a university campus. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah, yeah. They're
where they
pretty.
get fresh air, they have windows, like big rooms and stuff, and they have jobs, and
Yeah, you can
they're
have some
kind of.
pretty relatively fucking lavish prison
It's a
lifestyles.
very lavish prison life and it's like they have community stuff. I think that was like a really interesting way of rehabilitating them.
I know you're a big rehabilitating guy.
I'm
You would love like I get what was it, Denmark or whoever.
somewhere like that. Well, I guess I do have this maybe optimism of humanity where people are good and pure at heart. It's just due to incentives, due to circumstances that kind of led them into directions that, like for
Yeah,
most people, I think that's what they are. I do agree there are probably some people who have kind of messed up thinking due to tragedies that happen in their life, or maybe yeah, I don't know. I don't know if someone is born evil. Like I don't know if someone just have evil thoughts or things
no,
created. Like
totally. No, yeah, a lot of it. Even if someone was like the majority, the biggest, I feel like the biggest part of shaping someone's life is in their like surroundings and how they're grown up and whatever. So
yeah, I agree. Like
like
I think even like for school and stuff, the biggest impact in any kid's education is not the school they go to, not the teachers they have, and not the opportunities they get given. It's family, it's their parents. Like how much time are their parents are available to them to support them, right? Because if their parents are always working or their parents are addicts, these kids, even if you put them in Ivy League school, they're not going to do well. So it doesn't matter, right? It
yeah,
comes
yeah,
down to their parents.
yeah. Well, like their whole worldview on stuff, whether they view other people, whether they have like a more compassionate outlook, or if they have a more selfish outlook, it is
Hmm.
like kind of like their environment that brings them up into something like that.
Hmm.
The majority, like there's obviously exceptions, right? Like
Hmm.
you can obviously get someone that's just like like a psychopath that's just born as a psychopath, I guess, or whatever, right?
Hmm.
That like you could have been born in like a super fucking like charitable family, but you just want to fucking go around and like dismember people. There's like one in a 10 million chance that you could get someone like that,
Yeah.
but the other 99.99, they're not like that. They're going to be more. The environment is well, very very important, and that's how they're going to be shaped. So yeah,
Yeah.
like you improve everybody's like you improve everybody's material conditions, you're gonna see an improvement in society for sure, definitely. Like this is not like a fucking statement in the dark. Like this you can
So
empirically
we improve some stuff, but we also create new stuff, right? Like, for example, when we talk about in how industrial revolution um, modernized, say, agriculture and stuff, to the point where people don't need to hunt and we don't have to worry about when our next meal is, kind of thing.
yeah.
That improved that basic need. But then we have like new need or new problems, right? We have these needs of like I don't know, like finding meaning in life and like
Well, that's like all this is you're basically Marxism already like covered all of these topics in like
yeah.
historical materialism, right? Like yeah, of course the new when you solve the old contradictions, new contradictions arise from
Yeah.
whatever form you take.
Exactly. So like when you say people are they better?
Well,
Are these new problems better than the old problems?
Well, instead of something subjective being it's better or not, you can
Yeah.
the objective thing is just like okay, well, like society has improved its ability to produce.
Repopulate? Yes.
For production, production, and for society to like uh propagate itself, right? Like you've just entered new forms of it. Really, you take
Hmm.
whether it means good or bad out, this means you've entered new forms of it. And basically, what does that mean? Like, what does that look like for people? So then, yeah, what
Hmm.
you're talking about, like, just from hunter gatherer to farming, you saw some of the old contradictions in a hunter gatherer society, and then you introduce new ones in a farming one, right? The old
Hmm.
ones where it'd be like the scarcity of food is much more prominent, and your procurement of food is much more dependent on like a nomadic lifestyle, a seasonal lifestyle, right? Well, it's more like a communal, but also like a more communal like role that your tribe plays. Once you settle down, that kind of it changes. You got new contradictions, right? So you're
Hmm.
not like worried about like the paths of all the fucking deer or wild meat that you gotta follow. Your old contradictions that you get when you have to travel as a group somewhere that vanishes because you can plant crops in one area. But that makes new contradictions arise from there, right? And basically, I think one of the big tenets, well, no, one of the points that Mao was raising is that
Hmm.
through the contradictions, you do get changes through these contradictions. Like
Yeah.
it's yeah, like aside from like the material, like the technological advances, the social relations, but the contradictions themselves, like by going through them, by struggling, you do that also contributes to like the changes, and that will also necessitate the changes as well, right? So like that's how we can observe our current society. We're also going through these changes. Like we got past some of the older contradictions in like a feudal society, right? Or even in the beginning of industrializations. But that doesn't mean like everything's perfect. You go through you get new problems introduced, and that's the way it's supposed to go, right?
Hmm.
And from here on to the future, wherever it be, you're still gonna society's gonna change you still, right? Like there's no way everything stays static. Like
Yeah.
it that's a fairy tale.
So
It's
then
always
the
gonna
idea
change.
of like, how like say like if I only had this, I'd be happy kind of thing. Should
Yeah.
people just be like, I don't need anything because whatever new thing will make me happy will also make me sad because something
No.
else will come up.
Well, no, because it's some you're talking about if like if individual human beings will ever find satisfaction like 100% like enlightened nirvana satisfaction or whatever,
Well,
right?
I think it's just like the key
All
to
of that,
happiness is to look within rather
yeah,
than
even
look
happiness
out.
is all that is a subjective thing. Like
Yeah.
you can be happy with whatever. Like there's so many things that will like be cause someone to be content or whatever. But I
Yeah.
mean, the quantitative thing is you can notice very like we could say like a subjective thing like a very good improvement where you could say like people live longer, they got better nutrition,
Yeah.
they everybody has education at least, right? Like you could still get people that are depressed, but
Yeah.
they'll have a much better chance at living than on average than before, right? And that's the whole point that everybody's trying to get. Like even if
Hmm.
even after you're done, even if you come out of capitalism with, like you're gonna be materially a lot better, and that will translate to a betterment of life for a lot of people, right? But you're not gonna get rid of like you're not gonna get rid of like clinical depression about some stuff, right? You're
Yeah.
not gonna get rid of people like grieving if something like terrible happens in their life.
Yeah.
You're still gonna get that in the next iteration of society, and I'm assuming it's going to be a good one.
So maybe we should, how Yang was saying, like, how do we, instead of using GDP to judge the state of the world, we should look at
Oh, I totally
depression.
agree with that. Like what he's
So it's
saying.
like, is depression a sign that, hey, we're doing really well? Because by having depression, it means people aren't starving because
No, no,
we're at
fuck.
this new
That doesn't
stage.
mean
Like,
no. That doesn't mean dick all. Like Yang is not. This is not a novel idea proposed by Yang. This was already
yeah.
like everybody, a lot of people, everybody was saying, this is a flawed concept, and it's actually a more recent one too. Like GDP back then, especially when the Soviet Union was around, like GDP
Hmm.
was just one measurement. You also had like GNP and some other stuff, right? The gross national product
Yeah.
and some other indicators like especially life expectancy. That is not in that's something like people record separately. Like GDP doesn't capture something like that, right?
Yeah.
GDP doesn't capture a lot of like improvements to life, even material ones. GDP doesn't usually capture it. GDP is like strictly just the transactional, uh,
It's just easy to calculate, I assume, right?
like
That's why we
right.
use it.
Well, yeah, it's easy for the accounting books. It gives you like a metric for
Yeah.
accounting. So then, but people just if you use that and say this is all that matters for an economy, or this is all that matters for society, then yeah, you're missing out on a big picture, right?
I feel like we do that for so many things. Like say the Olympics, we only count the golds that we get.
Well,
We
counting
don't
goals
look
in
at.
the Olympics, I would argue, would be even a better measurement of some kind of success than GDP is. Because if you didn't just measure everything by GDP, you wouldn't have like this financialization of everything, right? Like this
Uh-huh.
exists just by, like almost, no, I would say GDP exists just to like propagate this continued financialization of everything where you produce nothing, but you make more money, right?
Yeah.
Like, like remember that there was that old joke. I don't know if I told it before. It was like two guys walk around on two like economists walk on along the street, and one sees like a pile of dog shit on the street, and he says like, "I'll pay you like fucking $5 million to eat that pile of dog shit," and like,
Hmm.
and the other guy, and then he eats it, and he's like, "Oh," he pays him the money, and then the other guy that just ate the shit, he sees another pile of dog shit, and he
Hmm.
says, "You know what? I'll pay you 5 million, 10 million if you go eat that one." And
Hmm.
then they get to work. The boss is like, "Where the fuck you guys been?" It's like, "Oh, sorry, we were late, but like." I was paying him 5 million to eat dog shit, and and then he paid me 10 million to eat dog shit, and then the boss would be like, "Yo, why would you think I'll be mad at all? You guys basically just contributed like 15 million to GDP, and all you guys did was eat shit along the way. That's perfect, right?
Hmm.
Like, like that's what GDP is. It's just transactions.
Yeah.
That's all it is, and you're assuming that within those transactions, like that captures the economic growth or whatever, right?
Yeah.
And then you get something where it'll be like the housing crisis because everybody was just calculating like fucking non-existent growth, non-existent money, you know eh, but like they package it up, whereas like you make it into like something that people can buy and bet on, right? Something
Hmm.
shit doesn't exist. And the economy,
Hmm.
like a financialized economy, a lot of stuff doesn't exist. It's all just by financial products and instruments that people like fucking have transactions over, right?
Hmm.
It may be on futures of companies that like just have these insane evaluations that may not even do anything. Like fucking Theranos, that company that was just a complete fraud, a scam,
Hmm.
had billions, had like a valuation of billions upon billions, right?
Hmm.
And it would be the wet dream of most investors if they could, if that company, like fucking went public, right? And people want to buy up, invest in it early on, so then they can make huge gains later on whenever it becomes public or whenever
Yeah.
like they can cash in on it, right? Like what was it in the end? It was a complete scam. There was a nothing. Like it was technology that didn't exist. It's nothing existed. It was a complete lie, right? And you got so many companies that are just like that.
I think that all of it was from Amazon, right? Because for a long time, Amazon wasn't making money, and it's all about evaluation. And then and then recently they started, making money, and then it's becoming the richest person, or Jeff Bezos became the richest person, yada yada yada.
This
And
thing happened before Amazon. It's just like the whole mindset when they say, "Hey, we can actually start valuing things on things that may happen in the future."
yeah,
And then whole industries and sectors of finance, you know, grow from that sort of like thinking.
yeah.
Whereas, hey, we can assign value
Well,
to
isn't
stuff
that
that
isn't that
exists.
what we're seeing with like Bitcoin and stuff? Just
Yes.
okay.
Yeah, like well, it stems from that, but
Yeah.
like the, it does stem from this. Like Bitcoin's not like direct, not like it's not like a direct one-to-one relation, but it is related to this entire like sham sort of deal where, like everything's by speculation and valuation. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
Uh,
I don't know. It's also the same with like countries debt and stuff. Like with COVID and stuff, a lot of people are so very concerned, which I don't know why, but like they're concerned about how much government is spending and things like that, and how like generation will ever pay off this debt and stuff like that.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And I feel like they don't. I don't know. I feel like they having the wrong understanding. I don't.
Yes, it's usually politicized. They'll be like, this party is doing bad because they increased the debt.
Yeah,
Look at this debt.
but I
And
feel
then,
like it's not like have we ever paid into debt? Like has things ever
yes,
got expensive because of it?
yes, this is actually okay. This is actually a complicated thing because it really matters if you are American or not, and I'll explain why. For most,
American as in live in America,
yes,
or like
you live
okay.
under like American. If you live in America and you deal with U.S. dollars as your economy, as compared to like if you're Greece, right? If you're Greece and you gotta like fucking deal with like the Greek euro or whatever the fuck and all that shit.
Hmm.
Okay, so a lot of this, like, yeah, if you think about it, debt, if you think about it as a way where like you owe money to a bank, like how you do in your everyday life, you would think like, yes, it is matters because at the end, if you don't pay it, like, they're gonna collect, right? And you're going to
Yeah.
get fucked, right?
Right.
The reason why I say it matters if you are American or not, because an American that's in right now, it's not like the way that countries operate, way that at that level of power and that level of like where you are, you're not like some individual that's trying to get fucking cash and all that shit or whatever, right? Like if you're the United States and if trade is all in U.S. dollars, you can't just print money, and the rest of the world just has to absorb it because everybody else pays in U.S. dollars. So you can be trillions upon trillions in debt, but the U.S. dollar is still worth something because the American government exists.
Hmm.
That's basically the simple reason of it. As long as they exist, right? As long as America exists and has like, I would argue that has this like massive military power to enforce its will around the world, the US
Hmm.
dollar exists. And it will, people and countries will trade with it, you can buy goods with it, and they'll print it out like overprint, like trillions upon trillions print, and you'll be good, right? The thing is like if you're a country like Greece, you can't just print out fucking before they had the euro, it was the Greek, I don't know, lira, or I don't know what the fuck currency they had. But whatever, they're using euros now, which is even further out of their hands,
Why
right?
Greece? Why not just Mexico, like
Greece
pesos?
recently, like only like maybe 5, 10 years ago, they had this crisis. They had a debt crisis, right? And okay,
Oh,
we can
okay.
use whatever country where, even if you're a country that you can print your own currency, if international trade is in U.S. dollars, you
Wait,
can't
when you
just
say country print your own currency, don't all countries have the ability to print?
all countries print their own currency, but I like that's why I moved away from Greece because Greece, you're using the euro, right? Like
Yeah.
the euro has a central European bank. Like
Right.
it's more in the hands of like Germany or whatever, like the euro
That is true. Germany
power.
has the most millionaires in
Yeah,
the
so
world.
well, no, I mean like Germany more or less kind of has a much more of a control over that like that euros central European bank than Greece does, right?
Hmm.
So even if you're Greece, you can't even print out as much euros as you can. You need to get money. You need to get euros from like the European Central Bank or some shit like that or whatever, right?
Hmm.
Yes, you're right. If you're talking about a country, let's just say Mexico, you can issue as much Mexican pesos as you want, right?
Hmm.
But what you'll find is you won't be like the United States where you can just print it out and the rest of the world has to absorb it. The rest of the world does not have to absorb dick all of your Mexican pesos. So
Yeah,
what
so
will
you're
happen?
only diluting your own
Yeah,
money.
you're inflating. That's when you'll see, yeah, I'm just gonna inflate my own currency. Like maybe it took
Mm.
me like whatever, 10 pesos to buy bread at the store. Like for the normal citizen, 10 pesos can buy you bread. Now you've printed out so much pesos that it'll take 100. That's when you see the typical inflation that everybody's taught in school, right?
Hmm.
And why that happens is because most you have to understand that like pretty much wealth is supposed to be based on like the production of your society. It's not necessarily like we can only view it, a lot of people view it primarily as money. Like wealth is viewed as money. You have money, you can buy stuff, right? And so you
Hmm.
view it in that way, like but it's tough to like transition that out of your mind that you've been grown up being used to like, okay, I use money to buy things.
Hmm.
Wealth, like if you're talking about the country or like the society, as an aggregate, wealth is based on like the production of whatever you produce, whether it's food. Well, food is the primary thing because everybody needs to eat, but just
Yeah.
stuff as well, like tools or whatever, like the production that your society can produce that contributes directly to the wealth. And then when you add in more than just one country and one society, you have multiple ones that trade amongst each other, right? Then wealth is like then you also add wealth is what you produce, but also like what you can trade for to gain, like material. You can gain material that you can't usually produce for yourself from other countries. So wealth is also what you can gain from trade, that basically the flow of material into your country, whether by self-production or by trade, right? So what facilitates this trade is, if you have two different countries of two different currencies or two different ways of measuring wealth, their own currencies, they have to trade in something that'll be useful to each other, right? So
Hmm.
if you think about the most simple way, you can say, oh, just straight up material by itself. So I'll trade wheat for your fucking finished goods or whatever, like for wheat for electronics or some shit, right? Straight up
Hmm.
1-to-1 trade. Like you need like I don't know 100 like fucking metric tons of wheat for a certain amount of whatever, like microchips or whatever, right?
Hmm.
Or like one microchip. You can think about it that way, but it's very hard to account for trade that way, right? So like like it'll be a nightmare to record this in the books and try to assign value to it, like
Hmm.
like, oh, fucking 30 bushels of apple to like one sheep. Well, okay, so what happens if you need to do like
So
15 bushels of apple?
I,
What is that,
I
half a
feel
sheep? Right?
I feel like what you're trying to say in the end of all this is that
It's a real
when
sorry, like,
America prints more money, they're not diluting themselves; they're
yeah,
just increasing
like,
others.
yeah, I'm basically getting at the long form version of it. Like, at the end of that, you need some medium of trade, right? And for
Yes.
us in society, it's the country's money. So we, like you could trade like in Mexico, you could trade pesos for bread instead of trading like fucking divvying up some sort of like thing of like X amount of cloth for X amount of apples or X amount of bread for X amount of milk, right? You trade
Hmm.
with money. Well, between countries, you gotta find something that will be that kind of international money between the countries, right?
Hmm.
And in our current society, it's United States dollars. That's the international money for basically international trade.
Yeah.
Or it was something like gold, right? A lot of cultures, a lot of countries recognize
I feel
that.
like this is why economists use the game Settlers of Catan as their analogy because it has things like. Well, I was watching high
Yeah, well, actually,
level Settlers of Catan. They
settlers,
use all these terms like productions and ports and trades. Like,
yeah, because you got to trade in what they trade in, and it'll be like like fucking it is like almost pretty much agricultural products if I remember right. In
yeah,
settlers,
it's wood, brick,
wood,
sheep,
brick, sheep, yeah,
ore, and
like.
wheat.
And this is actually a better if you play Settlers of Catan, you might have a better understanding of. I guess you might have a better primer of like making that leap, that kind of like that mental leap to thinking like, okay, yeah, this is what wealth is actually pointing to, instead of monopoly, right?
Yeah.
Monopoly is just straight up money, like whatever, right? Like
Oh,
that's not going to help.
Monopoly, it's a different. It doesn't teach you the concept of the game, money, and negotiation. I think Monopoly, it's
It
like a post commentary of how capitalism
Yeah,
just makes everyone's poor.
no, of course, yeah, it is kind of that way. Yeah, exactly that. But I mean, yeah. So I mean, like it takes a lot. A lot of people can't kind of get rid of that. Like, oh my God, the debt clock, and especially if you're in the U.S., oh the debt
Yeah,
clock, and but they don't realize that. Yeah, it is basically the strength of your government that guarantees that money.
it's a weird metagame that the
Yeah,
government plays
but
on themselves.
it's a very American specific thing to worry about that debt clock. For a lot of other countries, that if you have a debt clock, that's actually quite real. Because
Mm,
if you're like a small country, if we're using the Mexican example, you can't produce everything, absolutely everything that your country needs, that your citizenry needs, right? A lot of it, like if you want to still be able to import, you can't like blow up your own like fucking uh
currency,
currency and
like
your
the Germany's did in the olden
yeah,
days.
it's kind of like another it's another yeah the Weimar fucking whatever I'm butchering their name Weimar Republic in Germany yeah when it was just in just complete shambles when their currency was worthless yeah you can't
Hmm.
like destroy it like that right like and that comes into a different thing altogether where countries kind of have their own kind of accounts which is like foreign exchange accounts which is just the country's accounts of US dollars in the country, basically, right? Like that is something that, like if you're gonna trade, that's kind of like the amount of you use your foreign exchange reserves that you get from trade to import other products or whatever, right? Like in that way you can kind of visualize that as the country's bank account. But United States, you're not using that. That will be something that's kind of foreign to you because
Hmm.
um, you don't need to maintain a foreign exchange. It's not you don't need to maintain a foreign exchange reserve like Mexico does with U.S. dollars. You yourself, your entire
Are the
company, you use U.S. dollars, right?
You are
You,
the foreign exchange.
right, you are the foreign exchange. So that's why you can have an astronomical debt clock in the United States, but everybody's still using U.S. money because the entire world absorbs that debt, right? And
Yeah.
that's another issue all by itself altogether. If you're gonna ask the
Is that
question,
an issue? How's that an issue when we
well,
all
you can
absorb
ask
it?
the question where it's like, much longer would the world, accept absorbing U.S. debt, right? Because it's not
Oh,
infinite. You can't. There is a point where
do you
it
think
be,
we'll change to the yen, the yuan, the
I don't think
RMB?
it'll change the UN either. I think the next iteration of the world would be like a joint. It would be like something like a joint currency. Like right
A
now, there's
Bitcoin?
no. It would be because it would need to be something that's like under authority of some sort. It's not going to be like a free ranging Bitcoin. It's going to be something like an SDR or something. Right now, there's like a special drawing right monetary basket or whatever that the I
Hmm.
think is the IMF has, which is like an allocation of a different countries' contributions into like a basket currency, basically, right? Like a percentage of each country, and then the worth of whatever changes according to the allocation. I think in the future you can imagine if the United States dollar is just no longer good, you might have a future thing. International trade may be accounted by like a UN credit or whatever. So then foreign exchange could be under something like a UN credit. And the UN credit itself could be like a form of an SDR where you get major economies contributing a proportion of.
Okay, so say this does happen. Does that affect any of us? Or our daily lives would not even change?
Of course, it affect all of us to a degree. Yeah, it would. It would be like when the world went off the British pound and used the US dollar as trade, or you went off the gold standard and use.
What how did that affect the people? Did people lose their jobs? Did people have to
Well,
eat like margin as a butter? Like what changes would people see?
it came out of a crisis. The U.S. came off their gold standard in like the 70s or something, right? And that
Right.
was had a lot to do with like the oil shock that came out, like the oil embargo and the shock that came out from OPEC's embargo of oil, right? And let me think. Yeah, I think so. And like all of it had to do with the shocks that the whole world was experiencing from like the oil shock, but also the U.S. like the United States was like saying like it doesn't make sense for us anymore to peg the U.S. dollar to gold, so then they
Hmm.
just like started to float it, right?
Hmm.
And yeah, it had some effect. Eventually, like it had some pretty big effects. Like for a while, like fucking other countries had to scramble to like fucking because their currencies were some currencies were pegged to the U.S. dollar. So if they let it float, then you gotta let yours float somehow too. Basically, just like devaluing or whatever your own currency compared to the U.S. dollar, right? Or they like, oh
Yeah.
shit, like you gotta adjust to these shocks. Um,
Because I feel like people are like when they think of impact in life would be like a new iOS update, which would change like their apps and how some of the apps no longer work. But I feel like
I think
when these patches happens, I don't
what
know if
I'm
people
getting at
even
is
know
like
this.
what I'm getting at is like
Hmm.
it's not going to be like, oh, everything's fine and dandy, and all of a sudden you have to switch to a new dollar. For that change to eventually happen,
Mhm.
everything will not be fine and dandy at that point in time. That's why people would. That's why there would be monumental changes that would
Do
be
you
pushed.
think war could arise because of
Or
it?
maybe I don't know. It could
Conflict?
be as simple as the next big like financial crash, that big next big depression that comes out of the United States. Like if they have another 2008,
Mm.
maybe depending on how like fucking seesaw their whole economy is, it could very well destroy. Like I'm saying, like this would be like a one-off, but as a possible thing, like if you get the United States just completely just crater itself economy wise, economically wise, sorry, then you
Mm.
can see the rest of the world saying like, yeah, we're not going to fucking absorb US like fucking dollar debt buying or whatever, right? We're not gonna tolerate another like huge expansion of US money supply just to for them to save themselves. Maybe we're gonna, fucking stop trading in this because we're holding the bag for absorbing most of this like
I
fucking
guess
inflation.
we would see what's considered rich and poor countries that ranking might switch based on the new patch of currency.
In some African countries, they already use like not their own currency. So like in Zimbabwe, there's like a couple unofficial currencies that people use for daily exchanges, right? Like you can
Mm.
use like Chinese yuan, renminbi, and you also use US dollars, or you can use whatever, like French francs or whatever, right?
Mm.
Anything but the Zimbabwe dollar. But I mean, like, if it really shit really hits the fan,
Yeah.
then you may see a bunch of countries around the world saying, actually pushing for something that isn't US dollar denominated, right?
Yeah.
One of the ways that like the US dollar even supplanted itself as like the world currency of trade was from World War II. So
Hmm.
you can imagine that, how much the Great Britain pound like took a fucking pounding from the war, that and then from the US emerging as one of the sole untouched superpower industrial centers that supplied basically material to the rest of the world, and lending out money in the form of US dollars to pay for said material. You can
Hmm.
imagine like that's how you get the US dollar as like as the world currency to trade in, right?
Hmm. Yeah, they kind of position themselves in that.
And I
Yeah.
think China would not want to be in that position because in a way, like, oh, you get the advantage where it's like you get the advantage of oh yeah, you could just print your way out of debt or some shit like that, right?
Hmm.
The disadvantage is that just necessarily means that you always will be in a trade deficit because you always just the way the whole system works. More
Hmm.
US dollars has to flow out of your country to be used as a reserve currency than there
Hmm.
is flowing in and stuff like that. I
Hmm.
mean, like you could I mean, like China could do it as well, like if the US craters and then everybody switches to yuan. But I feel like the world, instead of this relying on one country on
Hmm.
providing this like economic umbrella, I feel like the world was gonna move on and be like, let's just have something that's better than this. Like
This kind
fucking
of reminds me of science. In science, like we have units, right? Like speed is there's like a standard unit, like meters per second or whatever it might be, right?
yeah.
Like how do we, like what is a meter per second kind of thing, or distance, what is a meter, and things like that. And for weight, we've always for a long time we use these kilogram, these masses that we say are the standard. But the problem with these standards that changes over time, and then they had to use a new concept, like a number that wouldn't change, like something that's not physical, to define what a mass is.
Yeah,
It's
but
almost
that's
kind of like the
that's a
same
question of
idea.
like precision, right? That's the
That's
precision.
due to precision, yes.
Yeah, like a precision that, but everybody agrees on like a standard of, of how of that precision of how precise you can
Yeah,
the
I mean we're kind of agreeing what currency is worth, right?
currency. Yeah, no, this one at its base though, this is very different. Like this is
Yeah,
based.
yeah, fair enough. It's different in terms of the objectives.
Yeah, this yeah, like how it yeah, what is meant to serve is very well, not what it's meant to serve. How it's how it exists, how it comes into being and how it exists and
Yeah,
perpetuates itself is different
yeah.
than the measurements in science and how they what's counted as money right now. That what's counted as this is a very political thing. I would argue right now the U.S. dollar is a very political thing, and like more so than like
Well, it really
a
hinged
financial.
Canada. Like something I was listening to, like a lot of Canadian enthusiasts don't like the idea how Canada is viewed as like the the copycat of US, right? And that it has its own all of its own culture, but in many sense, a lot of Canada is a copy of US, and in some sense, we do gain a lot of benefits from it because US has become that national power, things like that. But at the same time, people see us a loss because there's a lot of concept of like Canadians having the best and brightest moving to US, right? The Spain brain drain.
Yeah.
Um, what was my point? I had a point to this, but I forgot what the point is. Anyways, in some ways, I think as long as US is on top, it really benefits Canada. But if US is ever on the bottom, it would take Canada with it, wouldn't it?
Well, just because Canada has hitched basically their entire trailer to the U.S. car,
Yeah,
yeah, that's going. If it goes off the cliff, it takes Canada with it, right?
yeah.
There's nothing to necessarily say that you have to have it this way, but it's just because the United States is so powerful right now compared to Canada, and but geographically you share this huge border with them, right?
Mm,
Like that's just the way it is right now. You can't be like a fucking North Korea, South Korea type deal because the power disparity is so lopsided, and also Canada has a lot of cultural exchange and fucking cultural residue from the United States
mm-hmm,
that like it is very much connected, right?
mm-hmm,
But like in the you can see in the future where you can see, depending on how the winds shift, you may see a Canada that is more wants to move towards its own like Canadians like emphasize their own Canadian sovereignty, decouple from the US a little bit more. It just depends on like what the future America kind of looks like and how
mm-hmm,
future kind of goes too, right? So let's just say if China and Asia as a whole becomes the next economic center and the United States craters itself, you can see a Canada that is more wanting and more willing to pivot towards, uh, like a little bit more away from the U.S. than you get that the current Canada that's, wholeheartedly a part of NATO and part of like, the USMCA or whatever, like the U.S. Canadian Mexico trade agreement, like that's wholeheartedly part of this American system. So I mean, like it's just nothing set in stone, right? They always say like you never have forever friends or forever enemies. You only have forever interests or whatever as a country.
yeah. Well,
You
do we
know,
have forever interest? I feel like interest changes too.
yeah. Right now, the interest is basically as a U.S. protectorate,
Yeah.
right? Like every Canadian, even our foreign policy is basically it's very easy to tell. It's almost like a carbon copy of the American one at this
Yeah.
point, right?
Do you
Like
think if people who don't have forever friends, it's because their interest changes? Like people who do have forever friends or friends that they have
there's
since
never
childhood, is it because they're so static in life? That's why
for
they're
people
able
it's
to?
different. We actually build up relationships, like personal relationships. But like I said, I think in an earlier thing, I was saying like countries are not people, right?
Yeah.
There's not necessarily personal relationship. You get like the the trust in between countries is if your country, stays to its diplomatic pledges to another country and agreements or whatever, right? And
Hmm.
and a lot of it also is like the strength to back up the words. Interests always change. 200 years ago, Britain and the United States were like fucking enemies.
Mm-hmm.
The United States was more like, it was basically birthed by Britain, and they were enemies, right?
Mm-hmm.
There's no such thing as forever friends, forever enemies between countries, you know.
Yeah. That's
Yeah,
why people in diplomacies they get so heated.
like the Ming Dynasty and Joseon and Korea were like had a relationship of like a father, a literally diplomatic father and son relationship with each other, and yet you still have them, the People's Republic of China going to war, on the side of North Korea to South Korea,
Hmm.
like fucking 700 years later, right? Just
Yeah.
because South Korea had a new patron of America, and wanted to fucking, and then it became America versus like America versus China. So like literally, it's there's no forever friends, forever whatever. 700 years, and then these two countries are fighting each other in the war. And it's just because of the interests are different now, right?
Yeah.
The world has changed, so then the countries' own interests also change.
All right. So, kind of want to switch topics here to something lighter as we're ending the podcast soon.
That's not light. There's nothing evil about that. It's
Well,
like,
lighter as in like not a academic study.
oh,
You
okay,
gotta
yeah.
know shit kind of thing. Lighter as in this is something that's brief. But I finished this season, season three of You.
Oh,
It's a
I didn't watch it.
show.
I have no idea why it's like number one on
I
Netflix.
well, I think I don't. I never watched Dexter, but a lot of people or some of the comments I read say it's similar to Dexter. Like it's basically it's a story about a guy named Joe, and in season one he becomes a stalker. He gets really obsessed with the girl,
Mhm.
and like starts um killing her boyfriends and stuff, and tries to get with her and develop a relationship. In
All
the
right.
end of season one, it was just a bit of a spoiler, but his girlfriend finds out who he really is and all the heinous crime he has done, and so he was forced to kill her. And then season two, he moves to a new city, wants to better himself as a person and get out of his old habits, but then old habits die hard, and he falls in love with a new girl, and has similar beats to season one. Falls in love, da da da, right? But then at the end of season two, where usually he would stay with the girl that he fell in love with. He was trying to run away from it. Like he knew what he was doing was wrong, and he was trying to leave the city and stuff. But then it happens that the girl was also crazy. Well, not crazy, but she was also a killer in the same sense, and she fell in love with him, and then constructed this scenario where now they're gonna get married and have a kid and stuff.
How the
And
fuck
then
is this?
season three,
How the
huh?
fuck is this a lighter topic?
Well, my
Okay, and then
topic,
in
my
season
idea,
three,
my
what
point
happens?
is in season. So the problem is that season one and season two had similar beats and almost like similar storyline, but with different objectives in a sense, and new characters and stuff. So it adds a new dynamic. But I felt like in season three, so season three almost had the same premise, but I like how they kind of changed it for the first half, which was Joe, the character, feels like he's trapped in this lifestyle of being married and stuff, and then he falls in love with his neighbor, right? And then feels like, my true love is this neighbor that he fell in love with. But the wife, being the soulmate, kind of sees the patterns and knew what her husband was doing, and so he killed the neighbor. And then I thought this was a new, fresh take because now Joe, who wanted to get out of killing and stuff, is now having to bury the body and all the logistics of murder that his wife had committed. And I felt like these two were this power couple because they were like figuring out how to bury the body and like figuring out how to make up stories and covering their tracks and stuff. And it was a very like fresh take on this like marriages, the challenges of marriages, like um, how do you avoid infidelity? How do you inspire the best of each other? Things like that, right? But then at the end of halfway at the end of season three, it kind of went back to the same old storyline where the main protagonist falls in love with a new girl, and then and then like kind of repeats itself. And one of the things I guess I want to ask, like you've seen Dexter, right?
Yeah.
Was it very repetitive? Like, do you
Yeah,
feel like,
well, no, it's yeah, sort of. It's not really repetitive, but it's kind of it's just it runs out of steam at the end, and then it just becomes more and more. I want to say like stupid, because they
yeah,
just try to keep up the relevancy of the show, so they'll
hmm
have another season and whatnot. So it just like they didn't have if you don't have a planned ending on what it's gonna be, and you just let it keep on riding
yeah,
until it's just out of gas, then like that's kind of what Dexter kind of suffered. I want to see the new show, the new
Dexter.
yeah the new Dexter, because I was maybe they'll come out fresh, and maybe it'll be something that it won't be. I don't know. I'll see what they do with this new one.
I think that's the issue. I don't know if it's the issue with
I
creators or the network, but I
I
feel
feel
like,
like it's an issue of the show, the create the whole way that they create these network series,
yeah,
where like if the viewership is good, and
yeah.
they're greenlit for another season, then they're like, yeah, fucking let's do another season, and we're gonna try to keep doing as much seasons as we can, right?
I think that's an issue. Yeah, I think as an audience, we like as a show, like if the show is doing good, they should just end it, but then pitch to the writer, hey, I have a new show, and my name now has the clout because I made this show that
Yeah.
you should invest in this new show. And I don't know, people are just too. I guess maybe the network is all about financials, and we need to play it safe.
It
We need to
is.
see returns, blah blah blah, and it's all this issue.
A
But
lot of yeah, that's pretty much it.
mhm,
I think that's one of the main reasons why some of these shows it just seems like it just starts to become so shit after, because they're
yeah,
just trying to renew as much as they're just fucking run out. They're going
which is
like
really sad because like if you are a fan of the show, you really and like the beginning season is like really fresh and really new
yeah,
concept, and you really fall in love with the character. And then as the character just becomes like this unrecognizable mess near the end, you're just like, why did I watch this show again?
yeah,
It's just
exactly.
it feels
It,
very
it
very
is exactly that. And then I think that's one of the advantages that a lot of like Korean dramas have. The Korean dramas, the Korean shows that come out,
yeah
most of them, like a lot of them, are like they already have it set. So they're just gonna do one season or whatever,
yeah
16 episodes. That's it. That's the whole story. Even if it's the second season, they have the plans. I guess they've already written it out for the whatever second season, right? You'll
yeah
get some shows that still fall through the cracks and try to mimic what the Americans do, like Penthouse, which is one of these shows that was insanely popular in Korea. So then they're like, oh, let's just do Penthouse season 2 and season 3. But at
not
the
the
end of the
rest
show,
season.
it just got so crazy in the end. You're like, what the fuck's going on?
Yeah,
Very American, right? But you get a lot of Korean dramas like a lot of like the Reply series, and also Prison Playbook, Squid Game too, where it just like they just did one season, right, or whatever, right, and that's it. And it could be like critical
they're
acclaim.
gonna do more. But anyways, yeah.
Squid Game probably more, but like and especially the Reply series, they did it in a different way. Where the Reply series, I think I said this last time. It's a very good show for like character driven stories, right? It's
hmm
basically 100% based on the characters. So what they came out with like Reply 1997, it was basically just stories of these characters based in 1997, right? And it got
hmm
pretty good. It got pretty good like ratings. It got pretty good uh reception. So then they're like, okay, let's do another Reply series, but it's not going to be a continuation of 1997. What they did was the next Reply, it was set in 1994 or whatever, right?
Oh,
So, and
they
then
do a Black
yeah,
Mirror thing,
yeah, something like that.
anthology.
Yeah, and then eventually their best one I feel was Reply 1988, and these are all completely different characters, and
hmm
sometimes you may get like a bleed like a certain cameo of a certain character in a previous Reply
hmm
series, but that's it. That's like brand new. It's like a refreshment of like new characters, new whatever, but it's like following the show's format or whatever, right?
hmm
And then most other K dramas, it's just that there's just like one season. That's it. They're not, no matter how successful it is, like that's all the story was. So
Yeah.
there's no plans for like expansion or like a season two, green lighting another season or whatever. Usually they when they write and produce the shows, they're writing and producing just for the goal of finishing this, like for whatever allotment of
I
seasons
heard
they have.
that's like there's two ideas that reminds me. Let's thought of like when the creator pitch a show to someone, they spend like years pitching the show, right?
Yeah,
So they have all these idea of what this first season is going to be about, da 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 da, like writes it all out. It may have taken them years, like developing these characters and stuff. And they pitch the show, and then the network's like, okay, we'll give you enough money to do season one, and you know, they give it, they film it, da da da, and then the show was a huge hit, right?
yeah,
And the network's like, oh, we love it, we're renewing you, but now you have like a fraction of the time to do season two.
yeah.
Like you probably devoted maybe 5 years writing these stories, right? And now season two, you have to like come up with new storylines or continuation of it in like less than a week kind of thing. It's kind of like not like a week, but like a fraction of what you spent before. And it's the same for like mangas and a lot of stuff. When you're pitching new ideas that once it becomes successful, it's
Yeah.
actually it's the challenging part is to continue that same energy with less time. And I feel like that's why usually the best season of any show usually tends to be the first season because that's like the creator's heart and soul.
I would say
And
it's
then
arguable. You could have a second season or third season that's way better. I mean, but
it
I get your
can
point.
be.
Like, is this these shows definitely have a prime. I feel
Mm-hmm.
like you say,
Yeah,
like there's a prime golden age of this show, and then
it
either
gets it
whatever,
dilutes.
and
And,
it could be
mhm.
after the first season, like I said, but
It could
like
be after his first season where they get better writers and then
yeah,
they have this
but I think
golden age of the
I
show,
think
but
we
then it
agree
kind
that
of
like the
does.
show could just die out. Like
Yeah,
it could be way
it does
past the
die out.
show.
So then there's this new trend, or not a new trend, but there's this new term I feel like where people who's long fans of the show stop watching the show and only waits till the last final series. Then they like jump back onto it just to see how it ends.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean?
Their
I
own
forgot what the term is, but
their own
it's a
personal
thing.
edit of the show.
It's a thing. It's a thing. Well, it is a thing. Like for some, let's say you're a fan of Naruto or Bleach,
Yeah.
and you just see this show kind of spiraling into craziness. You're just like, I can't keep watching this. And then you just wait till like the final arc and you're like, okay, I'll just jump back in for the final arc kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
People do that.
And that's I feel like anime always has that anime has that specific problem of power creep like all the fucking time. Like they
Yeah.
always have to everything if it deals with like fucking fighting or something. At the end there's just you got to like Goku levels and then the beginning is so laughably weak but
You
relatable. At the
almost,
end you're like
that's how they
throwing
do with
galaxies at
sports
each other.
anime. But that's the same with sports anime because like sports anime, they really made the team super weak so that they can always add a new character with this like new position or this new power. And then once they fill in that power, they just
But at
add
least
in another
sports anime,
position.
you have like a ceiling, basically, right? You reach the major leagues or something.
Sorta.
That's it, right? Like you're done. Like what are you gonna do? You're gonna like you all of a sudden if you're talking about like major, all of a sudden like okay, you've reached the major leagues, and then how are you gonna get power creep after that? What like an aliens will come to the Earth and start competing in baseball?
Exactly.
Like you can't have unless like yeah, that would be the way you transcend the already hard
Oh,
cap
that's what they
of
did with
sports
Dragon Ball,
anime.
right? Because when Goku he was fighting the strongest people on Earth,
There's no
then
cap in Goku. There's no
a-
cap in Dragon Ball, right? So
aliens
that's why
invaded. Then they
it
had to
just
fight other aliens,
they just
and then
inflate themselves.
yeah, they inflate themselves
Inflation.
because then after aliens it was time, right? Different versions of time, so they had to fight the warriors of time, and then after time it was like gods, and after gods they had to fight versions of each other's gods, and it was just like,
Yeah, this
damn.
is a never-ending power creep.
Yeah, exactly.
It's even
And
more ridiculous in Naruto because if you know, like they got already in the original series, it was insane power creep, right? Where they basically
mhm.
introduced aliens in the end, right?
In
Like
Naruto, I didn't
yeah,
remember
well, in
aliens.
the end, it was Katsuya was from the moon or whatever, right? She's not human.
Oh, right, right. I guess
Right?
so.
And then in the newer manga where
Boruto.
it's yeah it's his son,
Yeah.
they literally they instead to like make it viable, they pretty much just destroyed a lot of Naruto's original power too.
Yeah, they have to do that too. Like it's the same in God of War 2, where they give you all this strength and have to like take it all away from you and have you relearn it and stuff.
Yeah,
And it's kind of like annoying.
but like yeah, I think the equivalent would be in God of War, like they make the sun, like they have to make the sun more powerful than Kratos. So I don't know, like they just fucking make Kratos into a handicapped guy, and his son is the new Kratos. Like that, it's just
Oh,
ridiculous.
that God of War. That God of War, yeah, well that one is taking kind of makes more sense because like
I like what
he's
they're
given
doing.
up.
Yeah, I like
Hmm.
what they're doing in like the right now God of
The
War,
Ragnarok
the
God of War,
Norse, yeah, the Norse
the Norse
gods.
gods.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
I
don't
think
like
hmm
if you watched Naruto back then during his prime,
hmm
like in fucking junior high or whatever. At
yeah.
that, it's kind of like almost like a self-report on our age. But anyways,
Yeah.
um, yeah. But then you watch it now, it's a complete mess. Like, okay, so if you've invested, the emotional attachment that like that you do that you invest into watching Naruto and you watch him like fucking struggle and grow
Yeah.
and give that and it takes that emotional like fucking currency from you, and then you see the current one where it's like, yeah, all of that was none of that matters because now we gotta like fucking make a story about his son and fucking all the everything like Naruto, Sasuke, all that shit done out
Yeah.
the window. Then you'd be like, okay, that's what was the point of everything then?
I think that's why creators of shows, when they make these beloved characters, really need to think as they can writing new season, what are we doing to these characters, right? Like, will people remember them for the good things, or will they just remember how they just spiral out craziness?
I think this contributes to some of the surging popularity of works of shows that were adapted from books or already established works, where
Hmm.
basically the framework is already there, and maybe you take your artistic license and how you portray it on a screen, but like you have like a fucking like almost like a disciplined framework already on there, like
Hmm.
as a book series or whatever, that you
Hmm.
can't go crazy because if this is a successful book series that has ended, you have already there the recipe,
Oh, I
the
see. Like a
character.
container.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're not gonna go all of a sudden. Not gonna go like full fucking, like crazy, like at the end of House or Dexter, or even just Naruto in its current manga, sequel form. Like you're not gonna go crazy and
I
start.
think that's what really, or that's where good artist comes from, is from constraint.
I
Because if
don't,
you're, hmm?
I don't think so.
Yeah.
Like from this. I don't even think this is a network trying to get like the network to greenlight another season. I feel
Hmm.
like that's not the part of this art. That's just a part of like just milking.
Milking, yeah.
Yeah, for
Because
whatever.
they
I
know
think that's the
they
detriment.
know like if the creator's running out of passion writing the same story about the same character they've been doing for years, they
Yeah.
can see it. That they're just, you know, just what's that phrase where you're just you don't care about your job, you're not inspired anymore, you're just showing up to do it and you
Yeah,
leave
you're
kind of
like
thing.
apathetic to everything.
Yeah, you're just chiming in, or there's a term for it. Anyways, there's that. But yeah, that's my fear whenever a show you really like continues like that. That's the fear. But actually, talking about nostalgia, Matrix 4. Have we talked about that?
No, we haven't.
Have you seen the trailer for it?
Yes, I've seen it. I haven't really looked into it too much. What is this? Is this it's just like an alternate reality if Neo didn't take
Well,
the red
before I
pill?
start, what is the proper term for the Wachowski?
I don't know. Just Wachowski siblings. I don't know. Is that what you're asking for? How they
Yeah,
pronounce
because they
themselves?
used to be brothers, right?
Yeah. So what are they
Then
now?
they
They're
became
sisters?
because one changed and then they became siblings, but then both changed.
I don't know. Fucking
But you wouldn't consider them sisters, would
just
you?
they're both still named Wachowskis, right? So just call them Wachowskis, I guess. I don't know.
Like, would sibling
Fuck, I
be
don't know.
insensitive because they're both female?
I don't know. I'm not an expert in this. I'm just as clueless as you are about these things.
Anyways, one of the Wachowski came back for to write the show,
Uh-huh.
and um, someone's view on it looks like it's like almost a commentary on the show itself. Season 4 seems to be a commentary of the series of the Matrix. I was
Really?
like, well, it kind of looks like that way because like um Neo saying he's having these dreams and stuff, and the doctor's giving him pills, and it's like the blue and red pill kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it's almost like whatever happened in the Matrix was like could have been just another simulation or something like that, or
I see.
maybe it's a commentary of the events of the Matrix. So I don't know. It seems like Matrix 4 might be a fresh take on the Matrix itself. Like it might not be just another continuation,
I
which,
see. So they're I like how they're coming back after they made such a horse shit out of like Matrix 2 and 3.
well, I don't know. Like some people argue, kind of like the same way people argue about Star Wars on the brilliance of Matrix 2 and 3 that people just don't see. Because I do think Matrix 2 kind of does have some brilliance in terms of like the architect and stuff. Like as a
Okay,
kid, when I
sure,
watched
yeah.
it, I
Yeah.
didn't understand it, but I think it is kind of interesting the idea of simulation always running and stuff, and how Neo was trying to change all of that. And like, I don't
Yeah,
know, like if
I didn't
they
like Matrix 3 for sure though.
three was bad. Two, I think two was bad too. I think the message just gets lost. I don't
Yeah.
know. Yeah, they were too focused on the machine and stuff. I think what one really did well was it felt more grounded, right? Whereas two and three, they just like pop the top off kind of thing. Because Neo just became way too powerful, and they had to power creep all the villains to be as
Yeah.
powerful. And they stopped focusing on the Matrix inside, like the Matrix
Yeah,
world,
I
and
think
kept focusing on the outside
that was like the
because
biggest
Neo's too
draw in Matrix
strong.
1. Like you could see him in like the simulated well our world,
Hmm.
right? But he could they're doing all these feats and all that shit and it just seems like it injected the movie magic into it and then at the end
Yeah,
when you get to 3 it's just a battle, like a sci-fi battle that's kind of like not even in the same veins as like what you were looking at like
yeah,
the almost uh like the trapeze effects or whatever that
yeah.
they could just float around in that kind of world and you get to this world where it's like a mech futuristic dystopian world. I and it was just I feel like it was just badly done as well.
Yeah, I think yeah, it definitely wasn't as well received, and I don't think I really remember two and three as well as one. But even watching one again, I don't think it's that good of a movie.
No, it was this is at the time.
It was
Yeah.
that time, like I don't know, it's not. I don't think it aged well. Matrix One. I don't think it
Yeah.
was a movie that
No,
aged
it
well.
doesn't age well. Of course, yeah, it is. You're exactly right. You watch it again, it seems kind of ridiculous.
It is, yeah, it's kind of like not that great, but it's hard to know like how a movie stands the test of time. Like,
Yeah, and sometimes I feel like it seems like movies some of them are just clearly bad. Like the mass of people are not just gonna enjoy it, but it gets critical acclaim of over something just because just because Hollywood like fucking Hollywood snobs like it. Like Once Upon a Time in Hollywood.
yeah,
Yeah, and they like to say if you make a movie in Hollywood about Hollywood, you could probably win an Oscar or some shit like that.
yeah,
And then this was the movie about Hollywood.
yeah.
And it was just a movie where it's like Quentin Tarantino's just basically fucking just I don't know, just doing some like fucking like snobbish elitist like jizz on that's like I don't even know how to describe it. I don't know if he's like even trying to make fun of Hollywood or he's like swooning for Hollywood and trying to make a love letter to Hollywood. But it's just like everything was just Hollywood related, and it was like the Sharon Tate, Charles Manson, Polanski murders, but also like done in the same way where Inglorious Bastards was done, where it's like an alternate
Changes the
reality.
timeline. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just like it was just littered. The entire thing was like
Wait,
a
why do you always
concentration of like 60s Hollywood nostalgia. And I'm like,
why does movie need to be a faithful portrayal of history?
no, it
I
doesn't
think
have to
it's
be. It doesn't
okay.
have to be anything, but it's just what it is. It's just literally just like Hollywood diarrhea that just came out. And
Wait,
I'm
so
like, why did
you
this
didn't like
movie
the
get
movie?
made? No, I wasn't. I'm like, why? Like, I don't think this was meant for us to watch. I feel like this should have been like an internal movie that you send to your friends and be like, hey, this is more like
Yeah,
a whatever 10-year anniversary.
Oh, what
Maybe
about the friendship with Leo and Brad Pitt? Did you like their relationship? I thought they were all right.
I didn't care for it too much. Yeah, I mean, like you're just
Mm-hmm.
showing two guys that are friends of each other. You could show that in any other kind of medium, in any other kind of film. You could show that,
Yeah, that's true.
right?
I didn't have strong opinions of that movie. Like I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it. I thought it was all right
But it's like,
overall.
what makes it all? What made it all right for you, though?
Hmm.
Like I feel like it's just so. It feels like it's just so empty. Who gives a shit?
Yeah, you felt like what's the point of this movie kind of feel?
Like it feels like if fuck, I don't even know what. It's just so insider. It's like if someone made a stand-up routine of just all inside jokes between their buddies and just placed it as a stand-up routine, and like, and and they're like, hey, yeah, this is gonna be great. I expect all of you to like it. And you're
Hmm.
like, nobody gets any of these jokes that are meant to be between you and your buddies or whatever, right? But at the very least, you'd get that satisfaction of just a dead room of like a stand-up bombing in real time, right?
Hmm.
But with this movie, you don't get any of that. It's just that, they're not gonna get like a reality check from that. It's just like, oh, here it is. I shoot it and I roll credits. There you go. Boom. Movie. Good
Hmm.
movie. And but after you watch it, you're just like, what the fuck did I just watch? What is this garbage?
Well,
I don't know.
in terms of good movies, you told me you watched Dune, and it seems like you had positive reviews for it.
Yeah, it was not bad. I haven't read the book, mind you, but just what I gleaned from the movie, it was not bad.
I like
Uh,
that director, Denis. He does a lot of alien movies.
Villeneuve.
Yeah,
I
he
don't
had
know.
a French last name.
I don't know how to pronounce his name.
I thought because one of the commentary I listened to was really funny. It was the story writer for Arrival.
Yeah.
He was the screenwriter for it, and because he writes like how the movie, like Denis, uh, directed the movie, but he screenwrote it. And there
Uh-huh.
was a scene where he wrote how Amy Adams heard some Chinese or heard the conversation in Mandarin and stuff, and she would read back to the guy, the general, and that's how she saved the world, kind of thing.
Uh-huh.
And so in the screenwriting, he was just like, she says something in Mandarin and saves the world. And then Denise calls the screenwriter, Eric, and asks Eric, like, what does she says? Like, and start making Eric panic because,
Yeah.
it's like, oh, we need to know what she says. This is important. This is the word that saves the world, blah, blah, blah. And Eric's like, ah, shit. And he starts scrambling, trying to make up shit, right? And then he figured out this, like, old poem, or I guess he found this old poem about war doesn't create heroes, it creates widows or something like that. I think that was the phrase, right? Have you seen Arrival? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I saw it. The Rivals sucked balls.
Okay, but
Very bad.
that scene I'm talking about where she like spoke the
Yeah.
Mandarin, right?
Yeah.
So he found that and put it in the movie. And I think it was funny because when Denise filmed it and all that stuff, the funny part is that he never subtitled that section, right? So
Uh-huh.
every non-native Chinese people would have no idea what she said. And Eric was so pissed because he spent so much time finding that poem and writing it that no one would appreciate what he found.
Well, you know what? No one should appreciate what he found because it sounds like he half-assed it. And I feel like, oh, I'm gonna find some fucking profound Chinese proverb or something, and just fucking copy and paste that shit in. And I'm like
Well,
thinking, what the fuck, man? Just leave it alone. Yeah, the movie sucks, and the whole portrayal of it was sucked anyways, and the
what?
Chinese in it sucked. So I'm like, it doesn't
Why
matter.
did
You know
you?
what? If this guy was pissed off because he got slighted, then I hope he got good. I hope he does feel that because I've watched. I'm like, this is pretty fucking cheap. Just
Yeah,
any like the portrayal that they have for like most of these things.
yeah.
He's a Chinese in that movie. This is so cheap. It's just such
Oh,
a fucking.
I see why you don't like the movie.
It was
It's how
so
they portray the Chinese. But
no, no,
anyways,
no. If you took away from the Chinese, if you took away the Chinese and you put someone else in there, it would still be a shitty movie. Because I'm just like, just the way
wait.
that they
How about
told
the
the movie.
movie The Martian? They also have Chinese people. I thought the Chinese was terrible in that movie too.
Yeah, sure. The Chinese could be terrible, but the movie itself, it was decent.
What?
Like the
The
way
Chinese saving the day? That was just ridiculous.
it could be, you could take that out. You can take that entire thing out, but just the Martian, the rest of the story was pretty good.
Uh, it's all right. I don't know. I enjoyed the idea of Arrival in terms of linguistics and stuff, and how do we describe fire hydrant and how you need to build these bases of a language and stuff in
It
order to
was such
communicate.
a lib take movie. That's why you fucking liked it. I fuck yeah, like some concepts they try to explore it in a
Yeah.
very like very different way, and you could think about, oh yeah, that could be cool. But at the end of the day, I just feel like they just lived the whole thing up, and
Okay.
it was just
But
the
anyways,
most stupidest way possible.
what's important is not the screenwriter, but the director, Denise. And the way Denise likes to do is he does like to film these awe-inspiring shots. Like in Arrival, whether you like the movie or not, but there are scenes where how he shot like the landscape and stuff and how the
Yes,
spaceship was
I
floating
will.
was really
Yeah,
cool.
you're right.
And I
You're right.
think,
He does like he does like to shoot these like you said, these awe-inspiring ones where he likes to just fucking make it so the like the background is just something that's huge or something. That's something that can fill the camera very in a very nice way, I
yeah,
guess. From the point of view,
it's like the setting has a life of its own in a
pretty
sense.
much like the style is just like it comes from like a person as you would if you're looking at like just a massive gargantuan like
Yeah.
monument or something. That's the kind of like the shots that he likes to take it in, and I like that. I do like that. He had some pretty good shots in Dune as well, where it was like that.
So
Uh,
what did you said the movie is all right then. So
yeah, it was pretty
you
good.
don't
I
think
mean,
it'll be a big hit? Like do you think it'll be like
well,
a
it would
Star
matter.
Wars franchise kind of
It
thing
really
or
matters if the subsequent movies are good. Then it could be as big a hit. I
what
feel
they need they I don't know if they're greenlit for the second one because I think this one is to test the engagement.
it is.
Like and I feel like a lot of it is going to be really hinge on how many people actually go to the theaters to watch it because with streaming and stuff the numbers may not be as good.
Yeah, if it's by itself, yeah, it's not gonna be that great. But like, I liked it because it has like the potential to be pretty good, like a pretty good space opera. And
Okay.
I don't like the ending of this one is supposed to be, it ends where it ends. It's kind of like a cliffhanger sort of deal. Like it's waiting on the second part of the movie, right?
Right.
So like if you're just watching it by itself, it's not gonna be like in Star Wars, the first Star Wars movie, A New Hope, it ends
Mm-hmm.
in a way, like the Death Star is destroyed. There's a big conclusion already in that first movie of Star Wars, right? You
Mm.
don't get a big conclusion in Dune Part One. The ending is just to be like, okay, it's basically it's it's like to be continued. That
Oh,
is what the kind of the ending is in this one, right?
sometimes I'm not a fan of those. It just
Which is
feels
I'm not a fan either, which is why like I'm not like, oh, this is the fucking great best
oh,
movie. It's
is why
just
you're
like the
so
ending is
reserved.
like, yeah, the
Hmm.
ending is like, yeah, I would rather have a better ending, but I understand why the ending's like that. And
Yeah.
it would this entire franchise, the first movie would depend on whether the subsequent ones are good. Because if you're ending it on a cliffhanger like that, and then the cliffhanger leads into something that was just made like horse shit, then yeah, you're gonna take away from like the prestige of the first movie, right?
Yeah. So overall, you would tell people to watch it, or
Yeah, I would.
yeah.
I would
Hmm.
because just the movie itself, it's worth watching. It's got some pretty good. If you want to watch sci-fi, it's pretty good. Like it's way better than fucking Arrival or even the current
Well, I
like
feel like Arrival
episodes
is not
seven
a
to
it's
nine.
not a sci-fi movie. It's more about language. I thought that was the main topic of the story. Like,
Okay,
how do we
if it's about
communicate with
language,
other people?
I feel like they just fucking blew the whole shit when they made it about time and everything.
I
I
thought that was the
honestly,
coolest concept. The concept of um how you would view the world differently depending on your language, right? Your
it
how
just it no, it it just blew past the barrier of
well,
credibility.
I do
Because
believe
what
like
Amy Adams learns their language, and all of a sudden she just has this fucking foresight of time, past and present, just from like I just
that's
it's just
yeah, that's the
too
idea.
incredible.
Well, it is a bit of a leap, but like the idea that let's say learning Japanese, how people seem to be more, I guess,
Yeah,
modest
I
or
mean, if it was like if it was done through like an observation of like society to society, culture to culture, I would make sense. But like you're not gonna learn Japanese and all of a sudden your entire sense of self, your entire sense of time has been switched or whatever, right?
Oh,
Like this fucking
I think the I well, okay. Well, I guess there's this idea of like if you enjoy a movie, then you can always make that leap of faith or that bridge of disbelief a lot easier. But if you didn't enjoy the movie, then usually when things happen in movies that seems unbelievable,
of
then
course, but
yes,
also you gotta of
you're
course,
less favorable to it.
but also like the
Hmm.
makers of the movie has to like bet on like, oh, we're not gonna pretend our audience is a bunch of fucking dumbasses, right? And we're not gonna serve like a
Yeah,
slop that demands for you to accept it the way it
because
is.
the movie was based on the short story,
Well,
with
then
a
the short
similar
story sucks. What can I say?
well, the short story won awards. That's why they made the movie off of
Sure,
it.
I don't know. It's the way that I watched. I didn't read the short story. I watched the
Yeah.
movie version of it. The movie version of it sucked. It looked
Well,
like
the idea, well, the short story had this concept. They didn't put it in the movie because it wasn't as relevant. But I thought the idea, like how each little country had a piece of it, was the idea that they were supposed to form it together to build a spaceship, and then in the Earth, mankind can ascend to different planets and stuff. They also did include the time traveling section, but that's one part in the book. In the story wasn't in the movie.
okay. I don't know. Either way, the movie blew. It blew pretty hard.
I think that reveal was cool. The idea, like, because, like, when the movie started, you get these, what you thought was flashbacks, right? Of
Yeah,
the
but it's
mother and the relationship,
actually in the
a flash
she.
forward, a flash forward, right? And I thought that was really cool as a way of, um, what's that word? Um, that expectation, the version of
Sure,
expectation.
but it was just like a twist for the sake of it. I mean, like just basing it
No,
off.
that's not a twist of a single twist. There are movies that the twist is almost like
I
ridiculous.
feel
Like the
like it
movie
doesn't matter
Salt.
because the vehicle that they use, the
Yeah.
language they use to deliver that, it just bombed so hard for me. So
That's
I
fair.
saw the reviews. Like a lot of people are the same way. They're like, "This what the fuck is this?" Right? Like, so it didn't come across as something that would be so like, oh fucking so rewarding, or even like it was like, what is this childish kind of view of these things? There are languages that kind of don't deal in past and present tense. So what? Like fucking you learn that language, all of a sudden you get like a time loop or whatever. This just
Yeah,
doesn't
but
fucking
like
work
when you
like
think
that.
of, okay, when we talk about languages, like made up languages, or the term is called conlangs, right?
Yeah.
A lot of them are based on other languages. Like if you think of Klingon, that's heavily based, influenced by English. The Jabberwockies, it's like influenced by like these native Indonesians or something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Um,
I'm not gonna time
Targaryen, and
travel. I'm just gonna say
but
this straight
what
up.
I'm saying with the one in Arrival, right? The language that's circular, I think that is a very creative language. Like, not whether it gives you power or not, that's not important. But what I'm thinking is like the creative aspect of it is a lot different than most made up languages because it's not based on anything humanly. When I thought that is really interesting because it's
Tell
an
you what,
alien that
if this was
is
like
like that.
if this was like yeah, you know what? I tell you what,
Yeah,
if this was like a dish that the guy if the creators of the movie was the chef and they created this dish, they did everything completely like completely unconventional and it would taste really good, right?
yeah,
It's flavors that you would have never encountered before. And then just took a piece of dog shit and threw it on it
yeah.
and then served it to you. That's what it felt like for this movie. They could have done all like whatever concepts, whatever they're trying to get. It could have been very novel. It could have been very, oh yeah, the new approach to these things and make you think. But just the way that they delivered it, that's on a just a steaming
Yeah,
pile of dog
I
shit
get
on
that you
top.
didn't like the
So then
movie.
at the end, I'm like, I'm not fucking eating. I don't care what you did. I don't care what kind of bouillabaisse you use. I don't care what kind of new technique of gastro whatever that you've came up with to make this dish. It literally dog shit is on top of it. I'm not gonna. This is not good. You've already ruined it. All that work that you wanted to do to try to be fucking novel and have this artistic take on it. You served it up in dog shit. So there you are. Good game. Have it.
Well, okay, let's say. let's say like Game of Thrones and stuff. Like there's
Oh yeah,
still things about Game of Thrones you still like, even if season 8
I
was
do,
complete garbage, right?
and I'm looking forward to how they would have the upcoming one. Uh,
The House of Targaryens
yeah, the
or Dragons of
house,
Targaryen.
yeah, the House of the Dragon or whatever the fuck. I will watch it, of course, but like Game of
Yeah.
Thrones, I like the show, the whole series is kind of ruined. Like I was planning that, once it's done, I would get like a whole box DVD set and just have some days where,
And you're like, hell no.
yeah.
uh that's yeah, it
Now it's
sucks.
literally
How
no,
it
I'm not
ended.
gonna do that at all.
Yep. I'm curious if he'll ever finish the book or he'll just
Like we
leave
said,
it for another
that was
Brandon
probably his
Sanders to
real.
finish
That
the
was
book.
probably his real ending, and he's like, "Oh wow, nobody liked this ending.
Oh, because
I'm just not
he
gonna
you
write it
think you
anymore."
use audience as the litmus test
I don't know.
to like test it and be like, ah shit, people didn't like it. Okay, maybe I'm not gonna do it.
Dude, whatever. He's his ultimate procrastinator. He doesn't give a shit anymore.
Now he's rich, and I think there's less of a drive for him to finish the
Yeah,
book now.
whatever.
He'll have to wait for Brandon Sanders to
Yeah,
finish it for him.
just yeah. Here's my draft. Just do what you did with fucking Wheel of Time. Just
Wheel of Time, yeah.
finish it for me. Wheel of Time. Also, I'm also looking forward to.
The TV series?
Yeah, the TV series coming out. What I don't know. One of these days, maybe we should do a Dune episode because I do have some observations about the world building in there.
Are you talking about the movie or the book?
Movie, book, whatever. It's the whole universe of Dune.
I have to watch it. I so far one of my friend, she's in the Hollywood industry, and she really loved it. She felt like no, she really praised the movie.
No,
So,
as a movie, it's a pretty good movie.
hmm
The shots and everything is very. It
oh,
does.
I didn't understand your comment. Your review was about time, like space travel. What does that have to do with the movie?
Oh, my critique or whatever. Is that what
Yeah.
I said? Oh, it's just I was basically talking about like the whole the political economy of like the how what Dune was like the backstory, like how there's like basically just rich feudal families that basically are in charge of administering these worlds in this framework of an empire.
Hmm.
And that, like cuz what I like to do is like I like to fucking get into it about like history and countries, and it's all intertwined with the, like I always say, like the structure of society is always intertwined with like the economics of it, like how the society and the relations and everything produces with it, right? You take a very, I don't know, Marxist or materialist uh discipline of it, right? And I like to kind of apply it at like on fantasy or science fiction things, because
Hmm.
the more it mimics like what would make sense that you can observe in the real world, even if it's a science fiction or fantasy one, the more better that actually the story is. Like the more richer the world building is, usually that is like a really good. It just creates a really good like fucking like table for the rest of the story to build from, right? And and
Hmm.
Dune has pretty good one. Like it's better than Star Wars, I feel like. But there are some things that would be like if you were thinking, oh, if this was real life, if you were the emperor, if there was a planet that exists like Dune, like Arrakis did, there was a mineral that there was a resource called that was just as important as spice was, and if space travel it took this amount of time, I don't think it would look like this. Like the whole power structure that exists in that universe, it may not look like
Hmm.
that because it just wouldn't make sense to look like that. And that's what I was kind of getting at. I feel like we one of these days, if we really wanted to talk about Dune, we can do it. But I have to like, I don't want to be like you and start talking about this stuff without at least
Hey, I
reading the
was
book
totally
or
right
something.
about Arya had no intentions. She should not have been the one who killed the Ace King. It was not. It was not her story to kill. Like
I'm
it was not
saying
her
like
enemy to
if
kill.
I was gonna make a commentary about it, at least I should read the books at the very least. But just from what I got from the movie, there was some stuff that didn't make sense. Yeah, so like it wouldn't make sense in this sort of political economy arrangement. but like that could
Fair.
be for another day. And this will be one of the rule of thumb that I kind of apply to like space operas and shit. Because it's going to be different from fantasy. Fantasy, especially like you think about Lord of the Rings, you think about Wheel of Time. There's no like, unless there's like teleportation involved or some kind of like astral projection where you can communicate much faster. You're still traveling by fucking horseback or foot, right? So a
Hmm.
lot of it would look like the medieval age, and there's a reason why the medieval age is the medieval age. The feudal era looks like the feudal era, right? And
You're talking about due to transportation
it
or
has a lot to do
limitation.
with distance and stuff. The distance and basically, it's almost as if the speed of the economy, right?
Hmm.
But basically, when you talk about space and space opera, you don't have that like cushy medieval era background that you can fall back on if you're in
Hmm.
fantasy, right? In space opera, you either have like science fiction, you either have long travel, like fucking ships that may take years to reach a destination or even generations, or you have something in Star Wars or a Halo where it's like slip space or it's like hyperspace. It's like almost instantaneous arrival, right? And
Hmm.
some space operas don't do well is they just have this fantasy made up and that they just roll with it, but they don't get that the time it takes to travel makes a big difference on even the political power that exists in some whatever fantasy world. Or else it if you don't follow it that way, then it kind of seems ridiculous and it shouldn't. And
I
then
think
a lot of those things
this.
won't make sense.
I think we mentioned it in Game of Thrones. Where season 8 travel
Yeah,
time
yeah,
became
exactly.
zero, where in like others older seasons they're like, oh, it took us so long to like get
Yeah,
to Winterfell.
and you can already see the immediate impact where people watching the show would be like, this seems kind of ridiculous. So imagine if you build an entire world out of that and then you have instantaneous travel times, but you still have like a feudal arrangement, then that would be kind of fucked up, right?
Hmm.
But in Dune, it avoids what like Star Wars kind of does, where Star Wars it really doesn't make sense anymore how they would how even the Empire structures it the way it does if you already have hyperspace travel like this, right?
Hmm.
It wouldn't you it wouldn't make sense if you had to like if the world existed like that in the real world, you know. So, but Dune actually does it in a way where I guess I have to read the books because I have to figure out what effects the spice does on space travel and all that shit, and why there's even an interstellar guild.
Yeah, the
It
books
takes
might
care
have
of
more of the
it takes care of all the
explanation that.
logistics. But I was just saying, like right off the bat, like if you had something as that valuable as spice on the planet Arrakis, that's only available on the planet Arrakis, there's no way you would have another like you would never infife that to another house
Mhm.
to take care of it. There's no way. If you're the emperor, no matter how no matter what the feudal arrangements are around space, and I'm assuming it's because of travel times,
Mhm.
that's how it would make sense. There's no way, first and foremost, you would ever let another feudal house be administering that something that important. Like you would literally move your capital there or make that your second capital, right?
I feel like your space opera will be. You've invest so much time into this economics, and then people are not going to see it, and you'll be like, I hate these characters, and then
Well,
just
that's why
shit
I'm
on
not
your.
an artist. I'm not an author because I would suck shit at writing like actual compelling storylines with compelling characters, right?
You would be
But like
like, the focus is on the socioeconomics.
but I could use my fucking like shit brain to at least like from off- from what interests me as a kid and growing up and all that shit. I can kind of tell some stuff that doesn't immediately make sense to me in this brain. And it's not just because it doesn't make sense. It's just
Hmm.
like if we have like it's like if we have air travel now. You can travel anywhere in the world in a day, right? In the country you can travel in within a matter of hours, right? You're not
Hmm.
gonna have a feudal arrangement in all of Canada anymore. Just for the simple fact of that, right? And and all the different changes in society and production and how the relations are between people, it changes a lot with like just the distance you shave
Yes, the
off,
meta changes with the technology.
right? So it's just like Star Wars is almost like having an emperor of Toronto or whatever, right? It just
Mhm,
doesn't make sense. But Dune, it does it in a way where, yeah, it's pretty decent world building, but
mhm.
still, there's some things where like I would never, like even if you were the emperor, you would never do this. You can imagine this. You would never put like House Harkonnen or whatever in charge of Dune. Like there was, I would,
This might be not Dune, but I do feel like media like Star Wars and stuff, when they have such an impact, kind
yeah.
of
So
shapes a lot of stories outside of its
it
own
dumbs
story.
down everything. But the thing about this
Hmm.
was Dune actually precedes all that. So a lot of it, Star Wars, a lot of it was kind of like inspired by Dune. So it's the other way around. Dune inspired more or less a portion
Oh,
of
that's
Star
funny.
Wars. Yeah, and it inspires a lot of sci-fi's after that, right? So I mean, it's not like Star Wars is dumbing down everything. Well, Star Wars is dumbing down everything after Star Wars, but Dune, from what I could tell, just from the movie, it was more competently world built than Star Wars was.
All right. Well, I gotta go, so let's
All right, man.
close the chapter on this one.
All right, I'll see you next time. Next time we'll have people on because it won't be some. I swear to God, I thought you had like you're like let's record right now. I'm like, oh shit, he has something to say, and it turns out you have nothing to say.
My big take. Hmm.
I-
What was my last big take? I don't even think I had a last big take.
your worst take right now was Arrival was pretty cool. That was
I think well, the things that I really enjoyed was the language building and the whole concept of communicating um, with someone when you don't have a common communication system.
You
So I
know
thought
what
that
would have
was
made it better? If Amy Adams had to receive something to a Deus Ex Machina or something, a
yeah.
device that would allow her to experience it like this way and then to understand their language in that context.
I
But if you're
mean,
just like, oh, I
mhm.
learned this language, I learned the ABCs of your language, now I can tell past and future of time, then it's like, okay, you're taking the piss
I
now.
mean, they took a concept and they yeah flew to moon with it, but I do think that's a small section of the movie, whereas there's a lot of the greater part of the iceberg kind of thing
I don't.
that was
I feel
also
like they just retarded the entire like bigger picture of it,
yeah.
just by having it in such a
Well,
ridiculous.
one thing I thought was interesting in terms of time travel is if you knew the ending, would you
Would you
continue
go
that
through? Yeah.
the same path? I thought that was an interesting decision.
Look, if they got rid of the fucking aliens and all that shit, and just if they could have just explored that in its by itself movie.
If they made this a fantasy, would you have been more open to it if it was magic instead of sci-fi?
Yeah, if that was a complete different thing, if that was what they focus on, like you know your future. If it was a thing where it's like, oh, you knew your future, and how it's gonna end, and you still go through with that or whatever, and you can explore that. Yeah, that could be something that's worth people
Okay.
watching and shit, and
Because
getting
I
paid
think the
for the
way they
ride.
told the story, I think, is well well paced. I think.
It is
Uh,
fucking dumb. It detracted everything. It
yeah.
made the movie what it is. It
Because
was
like the thing with the Martian, like I think the character it was likable and yada yada yada. I guess the thing I didn't like was just how their solution just came to them out of
yeah,
nowhere.
it's very stupidly optimistic that just
Yeah,
made into
where like
in,
they're like, "Oh man, our rocket
willed into
failed.
existence.
We
Yes,
didn't test it." And then China's like, "Hey,
yeah.
we got rockets."
Yes,
And you
it's
do?
very, very stupidly optimistic, and it's like it's very like lib optimism. Of course,
Yeah.
that's the way that they made it. Like the in between of the stories, the what he was facing, and like fucking growing the potatoes and all that shit.
Mhm.
They actually made it like fun to watch that part or whatever.
I do. Yeah, it was Mark. Was it Mark?
Matt
Okay.
Damon.
Matt Damon. Ah, yes. Him.
And the
Yeah.
book was the book was had a decent like story. It was just basically just fucking about him. right? Like,
Yeah. But anyways, yeah, we'll record the next one with more people. I will try to find a rant. Is that what you want? You want me to find a hot take before?
oh no, I just thought
Before?
you had something that you
Oh, I
needed.
thought you had. Well, didn't you say you had stuff that you could bring
I
up?
just
I
said we
thought
needed to fill the quota. That's all I did. You still said like, oh, do it right now, do it right now.
I just mentioned, as I mentioned, time is fleeting. So if there's an
Jesus.
opportunity,
Whatever. I will not answer your emergency podcast fucking calls anymore.
well, usually if it's a hot take, I'll write it down and I'll always mention it.
This is the Bmoney hot take show.
I think my last hot take was probably about the gurus, right? I think that was
Yeah,
probably my
gurus
last.
and bullshit.
Yeah. Outside of that, yeah, no, nothing really major.
Well, the fans, all six of them, love. They only listen to the show for your fucking takes, anyways.
but I'm sure they listen to your social, political, economic view.
I don't know. I think it's more of a maybe it's more of like a rant for me to release myself. I don't. I don't think anybody listens to that shit.
Part
Anyways,
of this is a therapy session. All right.
therapy session. Podcasting for me is me laying on the big therapy couch.
All right. We'll see you later.
All right, man. Have a good one, everyone.
Take care. Bye.